The Gu family's daughter has grown up, Part 2. This was the first time that Yu Fu had celebrated the new year in Eastern Ling, and she found the manor's traditions to be quite novel. For example, first thing in the morning, the Western Wing's yard became quite rowdy. Draping some clothes over her shoulder, she went to the window to take a look. Yao Lan and the younger maidservants like Yin Ling had climbed up some ladders to hang lanterns. A row of lanterns with various shapes was already hanging in the corridor. The white ones were of the jade hair, and the orange ones were of golden carp. Yao Lan was holding a pink lantern shaped like a lotus flower that was both round and flat. She needed to hold it with both hands to keep it steady. Because she was afraid of heights, she held the lantern with one hand and the ladder with the other. No matter what she did, she could not hang it up properly. "You can't do it. Let me do it." Yin Ling was not afraid of anything. Standing below, she anxiously shifted around and wanted to help Yao Lan hang up the lantern. Yao Lan refused. "No, isn't it just one lantern? I absolutely will hang it up." Yu Fu shouted out through the window. "Yao Lan is afraid of heights. Don't have her hang up lanterns anymore. Yao Lan, quickly come back and help me look for my clothes. Where did you put the newly made skirt?" "Ha, I'm on my way." Yao Lan complied and hugged the ladder while climbing down. So it turned out that she was afraid of heights. It was no wonder she had not hung up a single lantern. Yin Ling mischievously looked at Yin Shui, and the two reached a tacit agreement, reaching out to shake Yao Lan's ladder. "Hey, don't mess around. I'm going to fall. Help." Aunt Li just happened to be entering the courtyard. "Instead of taking care of helping the young miss get cleaned up, you're playing around out here. If Yao Lan falls to the ground, will you two take care of her work?" The two quickly stopped what they were doing, and Yin Ling stuck out her tongue. Yao Lan jumped down from the wooden ladder and handed the lotus flower lantern to Yin Ling. "Auntie Li, we're just playing around. Don't blame them." After saying this, she ran toward the room to look for Yu Fu's new clothes. Beneath a small pine tree in the yard, Qi Ting was hanging up a lantern and snuck a look. She wanted to see what Aunt Li would do. Aunt Li had always been strict when directing the servants, male or female. She definitely would not let Yin Ling and Yin Shui off lightly. From the corner of her eyes, she saw Aunt Li walk over to the two and lift her hand. A look of surprise appeared in Qi Ting's eyes, and she turned her head to look over. With a bit of a smirk, she waited to watch the play unfold. Aunt Li's hand moved above Yin Ling's head and gently removed a small scrap of paper. "Some lanterns will have bits of scrap fall off. After you finish hanging up the lanterns, remember to dust yourselves off. Don't mess up the young miss' new clothes." Yin Ling and Yin Shui cheerfully complied. "We understand, Auntie Li." Qi Ting squinted her eyes in disappointment. The Western Wing had become a monolith, and it was impossible to find even the slightest crack. Even the usually strict Aunt Li was giving her unspoken consent to these maidservants who were messing around. This left her with no chance to act. Nearly everyone in the courtyard was on guard against her. Even when she ran to Qian, her grandfather who doted on her the most, and cried, Qian refused to place her back in the position of taking care of Yu Fu. "You should already be thankful to the young miss that you can work in the Western Wing again, yet you still won't know when you be satisfied? The young miss is respectful toward the manor's seniors. If I personally went to ask, she might agree. But masters are masters, and servants are servants. Where are there any servants who would use their age to force their masters to do something?" On the contrary, Qian gave her a scolding, which left her without any support. "Qi Ting, you were told to hang up some lanterns, so why is it that after half a day, you've only managed to hang up a few?" Granny Lu walked up from behind her and looked at her with displeasure. "Look for yourself. Even though the girls that work in the young miss room are messing around, they've hung up more than you have. Since you are a maidservant who does physical tasks, don't bother trying to flaunt your position as a higher-ranked maidservant. If you can't do this properly, I will definitely make sure to punish you." After saying this, she gave her a warning look, then turned around and went to supervise the other maidservants. "Young miss, have you noticed that the new clothes have a different style than the old clothes?" Yu Fu wore her newly made red brocade dress and stood before the large bronze mirror. Unable to hold back, she did a spin. The pleated sapphire blue hem smoothed out and formed a circle when she did her spin. The flowing sleeves of her red top fluttered like a butterfly's wings. Although they were winter clothes, they were not as excessively thick as her previous clothes. Yu Fu was also short, thus they made her look even more like a ball. She had recently grown taller. Her figure was slender, and her waist was thin. If she continued to wear those sorts of clothes, it would no longer look good. In the end, it would be a dress that would show off her figure the best. Lien Zhu walked in from the outer room. The tailor who made the clothes is great at knowing what suits people the best. Once young Miss new measurements were sent over, they immediately knew what sort of clothes would suit young Miss the best. Unable to hold back a smile, she continued. Everyone says that people who are born beautiful will definitely end up growing improperly. As I see it, our young Miss has grown 1 year older but has become even more beautiful. Lien Bai laughed at her. Young Miss has grown up. You should learn a few new hairstyles. You can't keep giving our young Miss childish hairstyles. Yu Fu felt the pearl hairpin in her hair. Every time that Sister Lien Zhu does my hair, it always ends up matching my clothes very well. This hairpin is simple and graceful. Where is the jeweled chain that was used when brushing my hair? Is young Miss talking about the jeweled chain that had the flower buds? These sorts of items that were related to makeup were always handled by Lien Zhu. She pulled out a drawer to the left. The place that should have contained the jeweled chain was empty. She was shocked. It's always been in here. How could it have disappeared? It must be the 6th young sir who hid it. The 6th young sir has hidden away plenty of things that young Miss used before. Everyone laughed upon hearing this. The jacket that young Miss was wearing when you first entered the manor still hasn't been brought back even now. We will need to go and find Xiao Mu too, and get back all of young Miss things tomorrow. Mention Chow Chow, and Chow Chow will come. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi walked in from the outside. Hearing Xiao Mu Tu's name, they knew that they were being talked about. What sort of bad things are you saying about us? Yu Fu turned her head to look. Today, the two of them were also wearing new clothes. They were both wearing the same style of robe. It was just that one was a dark blue that matched Gu Xiang's steadiness. The other was a sky blue that perfectly fit Gu Yi's liveliness. Lien Zhu pointed at the empty drawer. This, 6th young sir, the jeweled chain that young Miss used to use when brushing her hair, was it you who moved it? Gu Yi coughed into his fist. Humph. Nonsense. Do you have any proof? Just look at how guilty he looked. Gu Xiang shook his head and let out a sigh. You are already engaged. Can't you be a little more mature? If Yu Fu was a mature girl and you stole her things, Yun Yin would definitely get angry. It's fortunate that Yu Fu. Gu Xiang turned to look at her. He suddenly could not say the words that were about to be spoken. The Yu Fu that he had always viewed as a child had grown up to his shoulders in the blink of an eye. She was no longer just a small child. The red dress that she wore was very fitting, and her charming face had lost some of its baby fat. Her chin was slowly starting to become more noticeable. She was clearly a budding beauty. She was a beauty who would attract the attention of countless young men if she went out. She was only 13 years old. It was truly hard to imagine just how beautiful she would be by the time she turned 15. It was no wonder Gu Huaijiang was so anxious, bringing up the matter of engagement during his birthday banquet and having Yu Fu enter the ancestral hall. Sure enough, he had great foresight. If they did not decide on the engagement early, by the time that Yu Fu became of age, would Marquis Gu's manor's doorsill not be completely flattened by people wanting her hand in marriage? 5th brother, why have you been looking at me for such a long time? Didn't we agree to go out and look at the lanterns today? Yu Fu smiled and did a spin. Look, I'm already dressed, so we can set out. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi's eyes spun with her, and Gu Yi unconsciously swallowed some saliva. Remembering that she was to be his eldest sister-in-law, he lowered his head once more. Gu Xiang hastily nodded. Let's go. We'll also send someone to get eldest brother. Initially, he did not plan to call Gu Shubai to come along. As the heir to Marquis Gu's manor, he had many social obligations at this time of year. Moreover, he had just recovered from being poisoned, and it was inadvisable for him to go out. But after Gu Xiang saw Yu Fu, he suddenly changed his mind. Yu Fu's current beauty would attract too much attention. If it was just him and Gu Yi, he was worried that they would be unable to protect her. Gu Shubai was currently in the main hall and meeting with the officers of the Gu family's army, including Yin Huasher and Hua Shanjin. They knew that Marquis Gu's manor had many social obligations during the new year, and, more importantly, Gu Huijiang had been unable to enjoy a happy new year because of the attack on Gu Shubai. As a result, they decided to wait for a bit before coming to wish a happy new year. Either way, the members of the Gu family army were considered family, thus Gu Huijiang would not dislike them for coming a little later. Everyone, please have some tea. Unfortunately, Father was summoned to the palace by His Majesty, leaving only me as company. It can't be helped. We just came today to see how the young general is doing. Just as he said this, a male servant was seen entering the room. It was Gu Xiang and Gu Yi's servant, Xiao Mutu. Eldest young sir, the 5th young sir and 6th young sir are inviting you to go out and look at lanterns. Gu Shubai had intended to refuse, then suddenly thought of something. Is it just the two of them who are going to see the lanterns? Or are they bringing Yu Fu as well? Xiao Mutu chuckled. They are bringing young Miss Yu Fu with them. Damn brats. If he did not go, they were planning to bring Yu Fu out themselves? If anything ended up happening, Gu Huijiang would have caned them until their butts bled. Gu Shubai was about to agree, but the room was filled with officers from the Gu family army. How could he ditch these people and just leave on his own? Hua Shanjin stood up. Young general, you go on ahead. We can feel at ease seeing that you are fine. We should also be on our way. Old Yin, isn't your son always saying that he wanted to repay young Miss Yu Fu for saving his life? Let him go with them. The sight of the bustling streets in the capital filled people with a sense of yearning. Standing at one end of the long street and looking toward the other, there was an endless sea of lanterns, which created a beautiful scene. Yu Fu walked side by side with Gu Shubai at the front, while Gu Xiang and Gu Yi followed behind them. At the very back of the group were Yin Zheng and a few soldiers. Of course, these soldiers were dressed in civilian clothes. If they did not, who knows just how much attention they would draw on such a crowded street. Gu Yi looked back, then moved to Gu Xiang's side. Look at them. What the point of them wearing civilian clothes? It's immediately clear that they're soldiers. They're standing as straight as planks. Gu Xiang snuck a look back and could not hold back his laughter. It's true. Look at how careful Yin Zheng is. It's as if there are assassins all around us. What a joke. With Gu Shubai personally taking the lead and with he and Gu Yi helping out, could it be that they would be unable to protect Yu Fu? If not for Hua Shanjing being so chatty, they could not have needed to bring Yin Zheng along. Eldest brother, look, there are so many people. Occasionally, pedestrians might get too close, and Gu Shubai would move to use his arms to pull Yu Fu into his embrace, shielding her from the people passing by. When the two came close, his chin happened to brush against her head. When Yu Fu lifted her head, she could clearly see the concern in his eyes. With eyes that shone like stars and were filled with kindness, it felt as if he did not see anyone aside from her. Yu Fu's face turned slightly red, as her chest began to beat like a drum that was following a rapid beat. Gu Yi stretched his arms and legs, resigning himself to being bumped into by others. Gu Xiang, I've suddenly started to miss the tomboy. If she was here, I could also protect her. Gu Xiang rolled his eyes. What? Now that you have both been paired up, you're ganging up to bully me? With a whooshing sound, a person's figure suddenly rushed to the front and stood in front of Yu Fu. Move aside. Hey, I'm talking to you. Move a little to the side. Yin Zheng was tall and large. With his bearing as a soldier, anyone who saw him ferociously standing in front of Yu Fu would go around. There was no longer any need for Gu Shubai to shield Yu Fu with his body, but he seemed to be a little displeased. He never should have listened to Hua Shanjin and brought this rash person along. Yin Zheng turned back and smiled at Yu Fu. Young miss, don't worry. With me here, nobody will be able to bump into young miss. On that day, he had rushed back to Marquis Gu's manor while forcing himself to endure and stay awake, never daring to stop and rest. The first person that he saw was Yu Fu. When he woke up, he was lying down in one of the western wing's side rooms. A young maidservant was in the middle of feeding him his medicine. It was only then that he knew that Yu Fu had saved him. She had treated the poison afflicting him and left medicine for Yao Lan to feed to him every day to get rid of any lingering poison. The grace of saving his life was something that he had been unable to repay. Now that he finally had the chance to protect Yu Fu, he would definitely do a good job. Oh, thank you. Yu Fu helplessly stood behind him. Seeing Gu Shubai glare daggers at Yin Zhang, she let out a laugh. Hey, isn't that Shubai's group? On the third floor of a building further down the street, the second prince stood next to the railing and looked down at the crowd. It was not just the civilians who liked going out at night during the Lantern Festival to look at the various lanterns, as quite a few young sirs and young misses from noble families would also go out to play. He had sent someone early to reserve the third floor of this restaurant for the sake of not needing to mingle with the crowd and happily take in the scenery at night. Where? Princess Danyang walked up from behind him and followed the second prince's finger and looked where he was pointing. Sure enough, she immediately saw Gu Shubai in the crowd. His tall body was slim and graceful, and his bearing was lofty. He was as graceful as the clouds above the mountain peaks and as refined as the scented Solomon seal. No matter where she went, she would always be able to find him. Gu Xiang and Gu Yi are also there. The girl at his side is Yu Fu? Princess Danyang did not dare believe it, as she leaned against the railing to look. Furrowing her brow, she asked, Second brother, is that Yu Fu? How did she become so beautiful? It looks as though she grew up overnight. The second prince looked at Yu Fu, his pupils slightly constricting. Who knew what he was thinking? After a long period of time, he finally said, she was always very beautiful. It's just that she did not catch people's attention because she was young. But have you ever seen any girl who is as beautiful as her? Girls at that age grow quickly, and it's already been 3 months since you last saw her at Lord Marquis Gu's birthday celebration. It's natural that there would be a great deal of change. Princess Danyang faintly snorted and turned away to ignore him. He was clearly poking at a sore spot by bringing that up. He clearly knew that the announcement of Gu Shubai and Yu Fu's engagement at Gu Huaijiang's birthday banquet was something of a sore spot for her, yet he still chose to poke at it. The second prince also seemed to realize that he had said something wrong and hastily tried to make up for it. Dear little sister, it was I who misspoke, so just forgive second brother, all right? I know that you are still thinking about Gu Shubai, so second brother will go and invite them up. How does that sound for an apology? After saying this, he raised his hand and had a personal guard go and invite Gu Shubai's group. Princess Danyang turned her head, but that person had already disappeared. She anxiously said, who's still thinking about him? Since he won't marry me, what would I still think about him for? Everyone knew that I used to like him, so how awkward would it be for me if you invited him up here? The second prince lightly chuckled. Who said that he won't marry you? Though Lord Marquis Gu openly expressed that he wants to have him marry Yu Fu, I heard that Immortals Valley did not agree. They also haven't exchanged keepsakes. The rites for the engagement have not yet been completed. Who dares to say that he will definitely marry Yu Fu? Princess Danyang fell silent. Thinking back to the day of Gu Huaijiang's birthday banquet, this did indeed seem to be the case. Her complexion recovered slightly, as she could not stop herself from smiling. All right, if that's the case, seeing them can't be helped. For the sake of having Father Emperor announce second brother as the crown prince, we can't distance ourselves from Marquis Gu's manner. An understanding smile appeared in the second prince's eyes. He understood his little sister better than anyone else. She might say that she does not want to see Gu Shubai since he got engaged, but she still liked him. As long as there was the slightest chance that she could marry him, she would not let go of it. Girls, they really were unable to get past their feelings. There was no shortage of young couples walking about. The girls, with sweet smiles on their faces, held lanterns given to them by their lover. Passing by a small stall that sold lanterns, Gu Shubai asked, Yu Fu, I'll buy a small and cute one for you to hold. What do you think? Yu Fu followed his gaze and took a look. This small stall had many beautiful lanterns. They were all hanging from a bamboo rack to the side. She stood at the foot of the bamboo rack and looked up, resting a finger on her chin. I can only get one, but these are all so beautiful. The lanterns sold in the street stalls were all handcrafted, unlike the ones in the manor. Though the lanterns in the manor were of exceptional quality, they were made to be displayed. Thus there was a limit to the shapes that could be made, and they were all patterns that symbolized prosperity and auspiciousness. The ones made by the stalls were not as fine, but the variety of patterns dazzled Yu Fu. Gu Shubai stood behind her and waited for her to slowly decide. If you buy more, would you be able to hold all of them? Yu Fu also thought this to be true. If she held 2 lanterns, she would not have an unoccupied hand. Gu Shubai and the others would have their hands free, but it would not be good to have a bunch of grown men holding these sorts of things meant for younger girls. Then I'll choose that lantern of the puppy. She pointed at a lantern with a charming white puppy, and Gu Shubai immediately understood why she chose it. Did this and Pangju, the puppy that she was raising, not look exactly the same? The owner of the stall was an old man with a kind countenance, and he brought down the lantern with the puppy on it for her. Many thanks, young miss, for the kind words. All of these lanterns were made by this old man. If young miss likes it, you can have it. I won't take your money. Yu Fu received the lantern but hastily waved her hand upon hearing this. No, no, money must be paid. The old man smiled and said, to have young miss carry a lantern that I made is an honor. Also, if others were to see such a beautiful young miss holding a lantern that I made, they will definitely rush to come and buy one. Yu Fu was worried that this old man would not take her money and quickly reached for the purse hanging at her hip, but only felt a few gems that she kept to play with. There was no silver or copper. For someone who almost never went out, where would they carry silver? Yin Zheng was about to rush forward to hand over some silver, but had a corner of his clothes grabbed by Gu Xiang. Don't go up and add to the trouble. Do you still want to find a young wife or not? Handing over silver and wanting to find a young wife. How are they connected? Yu Fu could not find any silver and turned somewhat awkwardly to tug at the hem of Gu Shubai's clothes. Eldest brother, did you bring any money? It was Gu Shubai who had mentioned wanting to buy her a lantern. Seeing Yu Fu unable to find any money but not make a sound, he wanted to see if she would turn to him for help. Fortunately, the one that Yu Fu looked to was him and not Gu Xiang, Gu Yi, or Yin Zheng. This made him feel satisfied. I did. He happily extended a hand to the old man, and something hard rolled into the old man's sleeve. Gu Shubai nodded to him. There are many people outside tonight. Elder Sir should take a look after getting home. The winter days are cold, so go back early to rest. The old man did not understand what this meant. When Gu Shubai's group left, he could not control his curiosity and pulled the hard object out of his sleeve. Heavens, it was a gold ingot the size of an egg. The lantern with the white puppy pattern swayed while she held it. Yu Fu was very satisfied. If not for her concern about the candle inside the lantern, she might have begun bouncing while she walked. Suddenly, an attendant dressed in black clothes rushed up from behind. His appearance was very familiar. It felt like he was one of the second prince's personal attendants. He saluted Gu Shubai. Greetings, eldest young sir. Eldest young sir, the second prince invites the eldest young sir, the other young sirs, and the young miss upstairs to look at the lanterns. Gu Shubai followed his finger and looked at where he was pointing. Sure enough, on the 3rd floor of a building further down the street, he saw the second prince leaning against the railing and waving to them. The girl in a flowery dress next to the second prince was Princess Danyang. He retracted his gaze and looked at the attendant. All right, lead the way. Everyone ascended the building and found that there were tens of private rooms on the floor, but aside from the second prince and Princess Danyang, there was nobody else present. Second prince has quite the influence, reserving this entire floor for the sake of looking at lanterns. It might be a bit of a waste. Gu Shubai stepped forward and cupped his hands in a salute, then turned to greet Princess Danyang. Princess Danyang had not seen him in a long time and had been worried that the atmosphere would be awkward when they met. In the end, he had his usual composure, and she silently rejoiced. She bowed. Brother Shubai. From the moment that the group had come up the stairs, the second prince's eyes never left Yu Fu. Girls change a great deal as they grow. Sister Yu Fu has grown taller and has a new style. Who knows just how many girls in the capital are envious of your beauty? Holding her lantern, Yu Fu was enjoying herself. Hearing herself brought up, she knew that she would not be able to continue playing. Thus she handed the lantern to Yin Zheng. She bowed. Greetings, second prince. Second prince's praise is too much. It is often said that one thinks about one's deficiencies the most. and Yu Fu was no longer the little child who would rejoice whenever she heard someone praise her for growing taller. Gu Shubai also said, "That's right. Yu Fu is still young, thus beauty is still not much of a topic for her." Subconsciously or otherwise, he moved to hide Yu Fu behind himself. The meaning of his actions was clear without any need for words. Seeing Yu Fu feel reassured by this action, Princess Danyang felt a wave of frustration wash over her. The second prince raised his hand, and everyone went out to sit on the balcony. Looking at the capital from this spot, the bustling streets were in full view. Looking nearby, they could see the beautiful patterns on the lanterns. Looking into the distance, they could only see the flickering lights in a variety of colors. It was resplendent like a river of lights made by the deities. "How is it? The view from here is nice, right?" The second prince was quite proud. Every year during the Lantern Festival, the streets are sure to be filled with people, as countless people come out to play. This building is always in high demand, so it's fortunate that I made a reservation early on. Otherwise, we would have no choice but to crowd into one place with the citizens. Gu Xiang was looking at the flickering lights off in the distance and suddenly turned his head upon hearing these words. In the past, we would always come out to look at the lanterns, and we would always be part of the crowd of people. For sturdy military people, squeezing into a crowd can't be helped, but for someone of such high birth as Your Highness, it would be best to be careful. The speaker spoke without much thought, but the listener thought about it too much. The second prince heard this and worried that others might feel that he was acting too haughtily, thus added, "Though this prince is not as skilled as you guys in martial arts, I am not that fragile. What's most important is that I brought Danyang along, thus it's not good to join the crowd." He ended up using Princess Danyang as a shield to deflect. As a princess, it was fine for her to be a little haughty, and nobody would say anything. Princess Danyang said, That's right. Sister Yu Fu is beloved by all of you, and second brother treats me the same." "Right, Brother Shubai. Has the poison already been completely treated? Do you want to have an imperial physician take another look?" Gu Shubai smiled politely. "Many thanks, Princess, for the concern. Yu Fu studied in Immortal's Valley. If she said that I'm fine, I'm fine. I fully believe her." Even after so many years, he always spoke to her so courteously. Princess Danyang was unhappy about this and looked at Yu Fu. "That's true. Sister Yu Fu is an immortal practitioner of poison and would be most familiar with using poison to hurt people, right? Who knew that you would also know how to treat poison?" I don't just know how to treat poisons, but I also know how to treat wounds and injuries. If Princess has an illness, Yu Fu wishes to be of help." Yu Fu pretended not to understand the sarcastic undertones, as she continued to look at the bustling night scenery and did not turn around to reply. Gu Shubai slightly raised an eyebrow and noticed the mocking tone of Yu Fu's words. No matter how others spoke to her, she never paid it much mind. She would only speak up if there was a chance of harming the others from Marquis Gu's manner. For example, when the clan elder misspoke outside the ancestral hall and called Gu Huaijiang muddled. The only other time would be if it was something that went too far. For example, when Cheating framed her for sneaking into the outer study, or when Lu Rui had snatched the treasured necklace from her. This was the only time that Yu Fu had gotten provoked by words alone. Was she declaring who she belonged to? Princess Danyang's anger caused her complexion to change. Looking over at the second prince, he had no intention of protecting her. On the contrary, he was looking at Yu Fu with quite a bit of interest. The look in his eyes was the same as if he had found prey in the middle of a forest. It carried a contentious look. A girl who had an unforgiving tone was cuter than one who was always gentle. She was like a little stray kitten. Gu Shubai slightly furrowed his brow. He felt that the way the second prince was looking at Yu Fu tonight was very strange. It was different than in the past. He could not immediately say what exactly was different. Second brother is in good spirits. I heard that you reserved an entire floor to look at the lanterns, so I will thank you for your hospitality and take a seat. Second brother won't refuse, right? The sound of footsteps came from the stairwell, and the eldest prince appeared before everyone. He was a little stunned. Shubai? So second brother also invited you guys. It seems that I am the one causing a disturbance. It was hard to say whether the eldest prince really did not know that Gu Shubai's group was here, or was just pretending not to know. Since he was already standing here, it would not be good for the second prince to chase him off in front of Gu Shubai's group. As a result, he could only invite him over to have a seat. The eldest prince looked over Gu Shubai with a smile, then looked at Gu Yi. Hearing that the two of you are fine, I can be at ease. When you two first returned, I thought of visiting, but I was worried that Marquis Gu's manor would be too busy, and my visiting would add to the problems. Gu Yi smiled shamelessly. I was always completely fine. It was eldest brother who was poisoned, but eldest brother has already recovered and was able to come out to look at the lanterns with us. Was he not embarrassed to say it? If not for he and Gu Xiang, those two half-grown brats, wanting to take Yu Fu out to play, would Gu Shubai have needed to go through the effort of coming out? There was a long list of things to take care of in the manor waiting for him to handle. The eldest prince then said to Yu Fu, I heard that this time, it was Yu Fu who went with Zhuge to look for you guys. Uncle Gu must really care about you guys, right? But I feel that this trip out was quite good. The young girl got to go out and get some training and has become much more steady. Even the eldest prince could tell what sorts of changes were quietly occurring with Yu Fu. Yu Fu smiled and said, Am I getting to be more and more like the head general? I heard the clan's elders discussing it, saying that I look more and more like I am the head general's actual daughter. Gu Xiang said, Speaking of, head prince, you have no idea how mighty Yu Fu was that day. Father allowed her to enter the ancestral hall, but the clan's elders refused, saying where is there any place for girls to enter the ancestral hall? What? Uncle Gu allowed Yu Fu to enter the ancestral hall? Princess Danyang was the first to notice. As a princess, not even she could enter the imperial ancestral hall, yet Yu Fu, an adopted daughter, why was she allowed to enter the ancestral hall of Marquis Gu's manor? That's right. As a result, take a guess at how Yu Fu replied? Gu Yi cheerfully chimed in. Yu Fu said, In this world, what is there that males can do that females can't? She even listed quite a few examples, which turned the clan's elders' faces green and left them speechless. Gu Shubai glanced at him, giving him a look to tell him not to say so much. Although it was not much of a secret, it was still a familial matter for Marquis Gu's manor, thus there was no need to tell outsiders so much. The eldest prince was a little surprised, then let out a laugh, as expected of Yu Fu. These words really are quite imposing. You have been at Marquis Gu's manor for quite a while, so it's natural that you would have a bit of a general's bearing. This is a good thing. Brother Yi Zhao, you also feel that way? The eldest prince and Yu Fu chatted and laughed. The atmosphere had improved quite a great deal from earlier, as Gu Xiang and Gu Yi were happy to join in. Gu Shubai held his cup of tea with a smile and lifted it toward the second prince. The second prince also lifted his cup. His expression was a little awkward. He was clearly the first one to notice Gu Shubai's group, and he had gone out of his way to invite his group up to look at the lanterns. But the result was that the eldest prince came, and he ended up as the center of attention. It was clear that the people from Marquis Gu's manor were closer to him. Gu Shubai did not show any clear bias, but that was just because he was the family's heir and did not want to take the side of either prince. A bit of emotional bias would not affect his final choice. But the second prince still felt quite uncomfortable. He did not like that Yu Fu called the eldest prince brother Yi Zhao but kept a respectful distance and called him second prince. It was clear that she thought absolutely nothing of him. He was the son of the empress and the one most likely to become the crown prince. Which girl in Eastern Ling would not try to gain his favor? The more Yu Fu kept a respectful distance, the more he wanted to be met by her smiling face. It was to the point. Second prince. An attendant that had come out of the palace with them quickly climbed the stairs. It seemed that he had something to report. Seeing that the eldest prince was also present, he appeared a little hesitant. The eldest prince looked over. What sort of grand secret is this that the servant looks so nervous? If it's something that you do not wish for Shubai and me to hear, we can leave first. Saying this, he stood up and invited Gu Shubai to leave with him. The second prince gritted his teeth. What is eldest brother saying? What sort of secret could I have to hide from you and Shubai? Everyone is family here. There's nothing to hide here. After saying this, He looked at the attendant and gave him a look of warning. What happened? Go ahead and speak. Gu Shubai noticed this look and knew that he was telling the attendant to reveal what could be said and leave the rest for later. The eldest prince's trick was also quite vicious. The second prince being on guard against him was something that the court officials knew, yet he had dragged himself into it. The second prince wished to maintain a relationship with Marquis Gu's manor. Thus, he could not admit that he was on guard against the members of Marquis Gu's manor. He could only have the attendant report it now. The attendant did not hesitate in the slightest, replying to the two princes and eldest young sir. News has come from the palace that Prime Minister En has retired from court and is returning home. What? This really was quite the big news. En Yin was perfectly fine, so why would he retire? He was only in his 50s, and there were officials in court who were in their 60s. To retire at this age, there had to be a reason. The second prince hastily said, "Has Father Emperor allowed it? What reason was given?" The attendant said, "His Majesty has already accepted it." It's said that the Imperial Court of Justice found that the assassination attempt on the life of the heir to Marquis Gu's manor was directed by Prime Minister En. There was also the seventh prince from Western Kuan who served as a witness, and apparently, Prime Minister En has already admitted it. His Majesty considered his position to be unique and permitted him to resign from his position and return home. In an instant, everyone turned to look at Gu Shubai in surprise. Gu Jiugu paused. Since it's a familial matter for the Prime Minister's manor, I won't ask about it. But young Miss En, it's not safe to be here on your own. I will escort you back to your manor. En Jiao desperately shook her head and bit down hard on her lips. I don't want to go back to the manor. At the very least, I don't want to go back right now. Gu Jiugu was anxious to go and look for Yu Fu's group, but he also could not do something as ungraceful as abandoning a girl like En Jiao here on her own. He hesitated for a moment, then said, "It's cold near the river. If young Miss En does not wish to return to the manor right now, how about I take you to a restaurant to sit for a bit?" En Jiao was naturally slender and disliked wearing thick clothes, finding that they did not give her a beautiful figure. Earlier, she had been too distraught to notice the cold, but now that Gu Jiugu had mentioned it, she found that her hands and feet were cold. Hastily pulling her cloak tight to cover her neck, she followed Gu Jiugu away from the riverside. The two randomly chose a restaurant along the main street. After drinking a cup of hot tea, En Jiao's complexion improved a great deal. Gu Jiugu said, "This place is warm, but it's a pity that we won't be able to see the lanterns on the street. The spots that can see them were reserved tens of days in advance." His tone was always gentle, and En Jiao's face turned a little red. She was very rarely treated so kindly by others. From the first time she met Gu Jiugu, there had been a strange feeling inside her chest. This time, they had a chance meeting when she was at her lowest point, and she had received his care and concern once more. This made that strange feeling in her chest grow even more. Having somewhere to hide from the wind is already great. Many thanks, second young sir. Gu Jiugu only smiled. Picking up a kettle of wine, he drank on his own and did not say anything else. He did not ask, but En Jiao wanted to speak. In truth, today is the day of my mother's death. Every year at this time, I would go and pay my respects. But this year, Father did not let me leave the city and told me to just stay in the manor. Even coming out to look at the lanterns tonight, I had to wait until he wasn't paying attention to sneak out. Gu Jiugu's hand froze. He suddenly remembered that the madam of the Prime Minister's manor also passed away early. He and En Jiao were the same. Both were people who had no mother. She had said that the Prime Minister's manor very rarely allowed her to go out. Was that the reason that she was not permitted to go and pay her respects? Gu Jiugu said, "Did you decide to go and cry under the tree from the heartbreak of suddenly remembering your mother?" En Jiao said, "It's not like that. It has been many years since mother has passed away, and that no longer causes me any sadness. Since father did not allow me to personally pay my respects, I had a servant go on my behalf, who knew that the servant would come back and tell me that this year's heavy snow covered my mother's grave, and he could not find it." As she spoke, tears started to well up in her eyes. Gu Jiugu could not stop himself from laughing. What is there to cry about with this? The snow not melting in places that are cold and dark outside the city is quite normal. It will melt away in a few days. Won't you be able to find it when you go then? The grave will be there and can't run off. What he said was true. In Ji Yao's tears turned to laughter. I was a little too anxious, not even understanding something so simple. Please don't laugh at me. The two exchanged a look then laughed. Gu Jiugu had already drank some wine today, and now he had downed another 2 cups on his own. Thus the wine was taking even more of an effect. He suddenly remembered something. How could Prime Minister Yin's wife have a grave that could be completely covered by the snow? Only graves out in the wilderness that were not overseen by anyone and unmarked graves would be covered up by the snow. In Jiao looked out then stood up and bowed. Second young sir, my maidservant has come looking for me. I will be leaving first. Saying this, she began to walk out before turning around and smiling to him. Thank you. What are you all looking at me for? Gu Shubai looking calm. I'm also very shocked. How could it be Prime Minister Yin who would want to kill me? His tone did not at all sound shocked. It was extremely calm. It was clear that he had known about this for quite some time. At the very least, he had his suspicions. The eldest prince and the second prince exchanged a glance, but neither could find any clues in the other's eyes. Could it be that Yin Yin had been suppressed by Gu Huaijiang for so many years that he chose to make use of an unconventional method and assassinate Gu Shubai? Such a possibility existed, but it still sounded a little far-fetched. Father Emperor has always had faith in Prime Minister Yin, leaving all of the court's important matters to him, who knew that he would betray the hopes of imperial favor. A prime minister suddenly retiring is not a small matter. It will definitely have an effect on the court situation. The two princes were both a little nervous. Any slight change in the court situation could result in a change in the prince's situations. Yu Fu slowly said, That's right. Now that prime ministering has retired, do we know who will become the next prime minister? The two princes seemed to come to a divine revelation, as the two happened to stand up at the same time. The second prince was the first to say, Everyone, please take your time in enjoying the lanterns. Father Emperor must be feeling uneasy right now. I will be going into the palace to console Father Emperor and will be leaving first. After saying this, he gave Princess Danyang a look, and the two quickly left the building. The eldest prince also said, I will also be going into the palace to see Father Emperor. Shubai, don't worry. I will do my best to get justice for you. He too quickly left. After they all left, Gu Shubai smiled and looked at Yu Fu. Yu Fu, I noticed that you've learned something bad. Who did you learn it from? If not for her asking who will become the next prime minister, how could the two dignified princes of Eastern Ling have acted in such haste? Yu Fu pouted. Even if I didn't remind them, they would have realized it sooner or later. Rather than watch the two of them sit here while worrying about losses and gains, it would be better to just send them away sooner, so we can sit here and freely enjoy the lanterns. Hearing her say this, Gu Xiang found it very entertaining. Little Yu Fu, I always that you treated the eldest prince and the second prince differently, but hearing you say this, it seems that you don't really like the two of them. The reason that the eldest prince and the second prince got close with Marquis Gu's manner was something that even an idiot could figure out. But on a more personal level, the eldest prince was a bit closer than the second prince. He was also a bit more fun to talk to. Yu Fu also called the eldest prince brother Yi Zhao with a very intimate tone. Yu Fu thought for a moment then said, There's not really any like or dislike. In truth, it's all the same. I just feel that the eldest prince has good awareness of the situation. Compared to the prideful second prince, I would rather get closer to him. Gu Shubai crooked the corners of his lips into a smirk, seemingly very satisfied with what she had just said. Who knew if he was satisfied with her appraisal of the two princes, or if it was because she did not have any special feelings for the eldest prince. Since they've already left, let's also return to the manor. Father was summoned to the palace today, and it must have been related to that matter. I want to hear the details from Father. Then let's move quickly. I also want to hear Father tell us why exactly Prime Minister Yin wanted to kill us. Although Gui had not been harmed in the slightest, He had been holed up inside the cave in fear for 2 days. Thus he felt that he had the most right to be indignant. Everyone descended the stairs to return to the manor. The night was dark, and there were now much fewer people on the street. Eldest brother. Gujyoga's voice came from behind them, and everyone turned back to look. Sure enough, they saw him. Where did you guys go to look at the lanterns? I've been looking for you guys all night, and still could not find you. Guxiang, Gui, if you guys were going to take Yufu out to see the lanterns, why didn't you call me? Guxiang pointed at the tall building beside them. We're being accused wrongly. When we left the manor, second brother wasn't home. How could we call you? Gujyogu looked at where he pointed. He felt bitter, but could not say it. He had passed by this building 5 or 6 times tonight, yet he never thought of going up to look for them. It turned out that they were so close, yet he had completely missed them. Gu Shubai said, We were originally looking at the lanterns from the street, but we were invited up by the second prince. Let's not talk about this for now and return to the manor. Gu Jiogu was almost unable to stop himself from rolling his eyes. You're returning the manor already? I only just found you guys and have not had a chance to look at the lanterns. After all, he had not come out tonight to look at the lanterns. He had come out to look for them, but as soon as he found them, they would be returning to the manor. Yufu stuffed the lantern with the white puppy on it into his hands. Second brother, just look at this one. Look, doesn't it look a lot like Pangju? Gu Jiogu received just a bit of comfort. Looking carefully, it really did look like Pangju. He laughed and said, This lantern really is beautiful. It's very different from the ones in the manor. Yufu thought to herself that it was natural that it looked good. This was one that Gu Shubai had paid a gold ingot for. Could it not look good? Gu Shubai smiled and gave him a tug. Let's go. Did you know that His Majesty has already uncovered that the one behind the plot to assassinate Gu Yi and me was Prime Minister Yin? At this moment, Father must have already returned to the manor. Do you not want to hear more about it? Gu Jiogu was surprised. What? It was Prime Minister Yin? He suddenly remembered Yin Jiyao, who had just been taken back to the Prime Minister's manor. With such a great misfortune befalling the Prime Minister's manor, it was no wonder that they were in such a rush to get her back. She had been crying so miserably and would probably feel even worse after hearing this news. Gui gave him a push. Second brother, what are you blanking out for? Let's go. A figure rushed out from a side street. Ku and Wushang stood on the main street and looked around the bustling street but did not see any sign of Yufu's group. It was already late at night, and fewer people were walking around. He was able to see the entire street clearly. Thinking about it, they must no longer be here, right? Ku and Wushang exhaled and created a small white cloud. Strange, Gu Jiogu had clearly come in this direction. So why is it that I don't even see him? He turned his head. Off in the distance where the lantern lights were waning, there was a group of people that looked vaguely familiar. Was that Yufu's group? Ku and Wushang immediately wanted to catch up to them. However, after some thought, Gu Jiogu had only just arrived. How could they go back so quickly? He would go and look in the direction where there were more lanterns. He rushed ahead and away from Yufu's group, gradually getting further and further away. After returning to the manor, they found that Gu Huijiang was indeed already in the main hall. Gu Hanamo and the others were also present. It seemed that they were waiting for everyone to return to talk about what had happened in the palace. Yufu held the lantern with the white puppy on it and wanted to hand it off to Yin Zheng before stepping inside. However, she saw Gu Huijiang smiling. The lanterns outside must be much more beautiful, right? The one that you're holding is very unique. Gu Huijiang had always been like this. No matter how strict he was with others, he always smiled when talking with Yufu. Yufu decided to just bring the lantern inside for him to see. The lanterns in the manor are also beautiful. It's just that there isn't much variety. There were a lot of people walking around and looking at lanterns tonight. It would have been nice if Head General could have come with us. The timing was not good this year. Next year, I will go with you to see the lanterns. How about it? Yufu vigorously nodded her head. After saying this, she obediently sat down and raised the lantern toward Gu Wenqing. The latter knowingly winked to her. Gu Shubai said, When Father went into the palace today, was it because His Majesty wanted to talk to you about the attempted assassination case? You guys already know? We met the second prince and the eldest prince when we were out, and the second prince's subordinate reported it. It was only then that we found out. Gu Huaijiang calmly nodded his head. The Imperial Court of Justice found that there were some suspicious movements made by the Prime Minister's manor prior to the end of the year. Lord Ji from the Imperial Censorate learned through rumors that Prime Minister Yin collaborated with Western Kuan's special envoy and Kuren Wushang. Since this matter was related to Marquis Gu's manor, His Majesty also summoned me into the palace. Gu Shubai said, "We heard that it was Western Kuan's special envoy that pointed out Prime Minister Yin's wrongdoing. They came to Eastern Ling with bad intentions, and His Majesty believed them just like that?" Gu Huaijiang shook his head. Naturally, that's not the case. It was Prime Minister Yin who willingly admitted that he had dispatched the assassins. He willingly admitted it? Everyone was shocked to hear this. Prime Minister Yin had always disliked Marquis Gu's manor, thus it was not strange for him to dispatch assassins, but to willingly admit it was strange. Gu Jiugu said, "Without any evidence, why would he willingly admit it? This is not Prime Minister Yin's usual way of doing things." From the moment that Gu Huaijiang left the palace, he had been considering this question. Even now, he could not figure it out. At the time, he had been paying close attention to Yin. All of his answers were logical and meticulous. It seemed that he had prepared beforehand. This is not the only strange part. Kuan Wushang said that it was Yin Shuo who had requested the poison. Since he wanted to get close with an official in Eastern Ling, he handed it over without asking any questions. However, Prime Minister Yin said that it was he who told Yin Shuo to request the poison. Thus Yin Shuo had no idea what the poison was for. Kuan Wushang was in the dark, and Yin Shuo was also in the dark. How could this be possible? Neither of them looked like idiots, especially Yin Shuo. If Yin did not want him to know something, there was absolutely no need to have him ask Kuan Wushang for the poison. Gu Shubai remembered something. I wonder if Father still remembers? On the day of your birthday banquet, the old servant who was tidying the room next to the outer study said that he saw Yin Shuo. On the day of the birthday banquet, when Gu Huaijiang suddenly left the banquet, Kuan Wushang made his way to the outer study. Sure enough, he took the opportunity to enter the study and tried to find some military information that would be useful to Western Kuan. At that time, Yin Shuo would definitely have seen him from the neighboring building. Even Gu Yi was able to react to this. Eldest brother means to say that Prime Minister Yin took the initiative in admitting it to protect Yin Shuo? It was Yin Shuo who asked Kuan Wushang for the poison, and it was Yin Shuo who wanted to kill us. Unfortunately, Emperor Ning would not believe Kuan Wushang. He was the prince of an enemy state, and he had a history of trying to steal military secrets. Comparing his testimony with Yin Yan's testimony, it was natural that Emperor Ning would truth Yin Yan. Gu Huaijiang glanced at him but did not respond to his question directly. Regardless of who it was, the one that His Majesty trusts is more important. Seeing that Prime Minister Yin took the initiative to admit it, His Majesty decided to give an old subject some face and allowed him to resign from his position. Eldest brother and sixth brother were almost unable to come back. If not for second brother and Yufu arriving just in time, they really would have been done in. Given the scale of this situation, that His Majesty allowed him to resign, this benefits him too much. Gu Xiang was extremely displeased. Father, why did you not ask His Majesty to punish him severely? Gu Huaijiang looked at him. What sort of severe punishment? In the end, Shubai and Gu Yi returned safely, and an investigation into Prime Minister Yin's guilt would just find that he failed an assassination attempt. Do you think that His Majesty only takes care of our Marquis Gu's manor and neglects the other officials in court? That's right. The Yin clan is not some nameless family. Their family has served loyally for 3 rulers. For His Majesty to ask him to resign is already the heaviest possible punishment. Even just showing consideration to the late Madame Yin, who was the daughter of the Crown Prince's imperial tutor, he could not give too heavy of a punishment. Gu Shubai's words caused Gu Jiugu to suddenly think of something. He said, Eldest brother, the Crown Prince's imperial tutor that you just mentioned, would that be His Majesty's teacher from before he became the emperor? Indeed. Madame Yin was the daughter of His Majesty's teacher and not some girl from a small family. Why would Yin Jiyao say that her grave had been covered by the snow? With the passing of the Lantern Festival, the imperial court reopened. With the court being reopened, it was exceedingly lively. The eldest prince and the second prince kept a close eye on the prime minister's spot, hating that they could not stay in the palace overnight and had to return to their manors. They competed to try and get someone from their faction into the position of prime minister. At this moment, whoever could convince His Majesty would take the lead in the competition for the position of crown prince. For this, there were quite a few officials who had sent letters to Emperor Ning. Some were recommending officials capable of bearing such a heavy burden, while others went along with what the eldest prince or the second prince said. As for the old topic of deciding on a crown prince, it was dredged back up by some of the older officials. Emperor Ning had to deal with this noisiness for a long time and felt quite irritated. He had no choice but to move from his study to the inner palace. Your Majesty must be feeling quite frustrated. This concubine personally made a lotus seed and pigeon soup. It reduces the inner fire. Would Your Majesty like some? Inside Qinghua Palace, Imperial Consort Xian personally brought out Bacaro bowl. The fragrance of the lotus seed soup overflowed. Emperor Ning took a deep breath and said with a smile, "We immediately knew that it was our beloved consort's work. Though there are many members in the inner palace, there have not been many who would personally make food for us over the past 20 years. His gaze gently landed on Imperial Consort Xian's body. Imperial Consort, you already had the eldest prince and was now in her 40s. The feelings between the two, however, remained profound. The feelings were not that of youthful lust. Instead, it was something full of understanding, friendship, and love. Imperial Consort Xian slightly nodded, her complexion slightly red. It's an insignificant matter. This concubine does not have any other abilities and can only offer Your Majesty with these small gestures. If Your Majesty can feel at ease for a moment, this concubine will be satisfied." Emperor Ning received the bowl that she had brought over. Feeling her frigid fingertips, he tenderly held her hand. Imperial Consort Xian smiled and pulled her hand back. "It isn't a problem. It was this concubine who accidentally came into contact with the cold water when washing the lotus seeds." Emperor Ning heaved a sigh and slowly put down his soup. "The palace is without an empress, and you have helped us by managing the inner palace. It's important that you take care of yourself. There are some things that should be handled by the servants, so you can just leave them to the servants to handle. We don't like people who don't stick to their roles." His tone suddenly became stern, and Imperial Consort Xian hastily said, "Yes, this concubine understands." She vaguely felt that there was a second meaning to Emperor Ning's words. It seemed that he was irritated with someone not sticking to their role. After a moment of silence, she slowly moved behind Emperor Ning and began massaging his shoulders and neck. Those were areas that often got sore for him. Emperor Ning suddenly realized that his tone had become more severe. "You must have been scared, right? We are not mad at you. We are mad at Yin Yin. He is a senior official who served me for decades. In our heart, Marquis Gu is ranked first, while he is ranked second. Who knew that he would so lacking in sense of propriety, going so far as to try and assassinate the heir of Marquis Gu in an attempt to gain influence? This even made things more difficult for us." Imperial Consort Xian gently said, "Your Majesty is talking about selecting a new prime minister, right? A country cannot go a day without a prime minister. Since Prime Minister Yin has already resigned, this selection needs to be done a little faster." Emperor Ning said, "How could we not know the reasoning behind that? Yin Yin left a choice for us that we also feel was very fitting. But Yi Zhao and Cheng Ji both recommended officials, while neither is backing down. Furthermore, they're only recommending officials that are on good terms with them." Imperial Consort Xian dropped to her knees. It was this concubine whose teaching was lacking. Though Yi Zhao is the older brother, the second prince is the prince born of the empress. He's too lacking in understanding of the rules. How can he dare to compete with the second prince? Normally, when she said this sort of thing, Emperor Ning would always comfort her. The eldest prince was the older brother, and his position was not lower than that of the second prince. He would also tell her not to feel so inferior in order to keep the eldest prince from feeling bad. Today, however, Emperor Ning did not say anything. Imperial consort Xian remained kneeling on the ground, feeling more and more uneasy. She just felt Emperor Ning's gaze linger on the top of her head. After a long time, that gaze finally pulled back. He extended his hand. Get up. Yi Zhao is already an adult. He has his own ideas and cannot be controlled by you. You have managed the inner palace for many years, yet you never brought up anything to us that would overstep your authority. We fully understand. The corners of Imperial Consort Xian's lips were a little stiff as she held Emperor Ning's hand and slowly stood up. He did not understand. A woman would not openly state what she wanted, but that did not mean that she did not want it. She simply understood that if Emperor Ning did not take initiative in giving her something, it meant that he did not wish to give it away. If not for that, the position of Empress would not have remained vacant for so many years after the late Empress' death. Imperial Consort Xian respectfully said, "This concubine thinks that Yi Zhao does not have any thoughts of overstepping his boundaries. Ever since he was young, he has been obedient and reasonable. As your Majesty's eldest son, he has helped share your Majesty's burdens and has done the best to fulfill his duties. We are worried that he has gone too far in fulfilling his duties." Imperial Consort Xian suddenly lifted her head. Emperor Ning's words were like a strike of lightning that struck the top of her head. After a long pause, she spoke with a trembling voice. "Your Majesty means, beloved consort, do you know the meaning behind our naming him Yi Zhao?" Imperial Consort Xian said, "This concubine knows. Yi means to support, and Zhao means bright. Your Majesty hopes that Yi Zhao can support your Majesty and be a bright and supportive person." "That's right." Emperor Ning patted her hand. "Not only do we hope that Yi Zhao can support us right now, but we hope that he can properly support the next ruler. Do you understand?" The woman's hand quietly pulled back and violently shook inside her broad sleeves. From the moment that the eldest prince was born, she understood this. The empress had not yet given birth to a son, yet she, an imperial consort, had given birth to the eldest prince. At that time, the empress and her family had many complaints. For the sake of placating the inner palace, he came up with this name for the eldest prince. It was the same as telling everyone that the eldest prince could not succeed him. Assistant to the ruler. What Imperial Consort Xian never considered, however, was that Emperor Ning would remain unchanged years after the empress died. She had worked diligently for many years and been a virtuous person, taking care of managing the inner palace for him, yet she was unable to receive even the slightest bit of his favor. Huaijiang, what do you think of our decision? In the imperial garden, wintersweet were beginning to blossom, as Emperor Ning and Gu Huaijiang walked side by side among them. Gu Huaijiang was a person with a military background, and his body was not afraid of the cold. In addition to this, with the medicine prescribed by Yu Fu, he was even more robust during the cold days. Emperor Ning, however, could not take it. He was getting old and spent his days in the palace enjoying his powerful position. Whenever he went out into the cold, his body would begin to tremble. Gu Huaijiang could see that he was cold and retrieved a bright yellow cloak from eunuch Gao, then personally draped it on his back. Emperor Ning turned to glance at him, and Gu Huaijiang's hand froze before continuing to tie the cloak for him. Emperor Ning laughed and said, "We are already wearing a coat, and now you're adding a cloak on for us. This makes it look like we are very afraid of the cold." Gu Huaijiang said, "This subject knows that your Majesty is not afraid of the cold, but the wintersweet are starting to blossom, thus there is not enough warmth underfoot. This is just a small gesture of this subject's consideration. I hope that your Majesty will not refuse." He always knew how to give face to Emperor Ning. Emperor Ning nodded his head. "The question that we asked you, you still have not given an answer." Gu Huaijiang said, "Your Majesty was already planning to cultivate in Shuo with hopes of having him take over Prime Minister Yin's position. Now, it's just that Prime Minister Yin left the court a little early. When it comes to your Majesty's plans, it has no effect." Emperor Ning sighed. "That's right. We made this decision long ago. It's not an arrangement that came to me overnight. If the eldest prince and the second prince see this matter as clearly as you do, there would be no need for the competition to get like this." He reached out and felt the wintersweet. Though the frost-covered buds were small, they were quite lively. Emperor Ning liked them and waved Unigao over. "Have someone pick a few of the nicer ones and send them to Imperial Consort Xian in a nice vase. We said a few things that were not too nice a few days ago. It would not be good to hurt her." Eunuch Gao saw that nobody else was around and covered up a smile. "Your Majesty, there's no need to worry. Her Highness Imperial Consort Xian has always loved your Majesty the most. How could she possibly get mad at your Majesty? You're the only one who speaks so much." Emperor Ning gave him a quick scolding, but a smile appeared on his face. He looked toward Gu Huaijiang. "We previously asked you if you felt the eldest prince or the second prince was more suited to being the crown prince, and you always refused to provide us with an answer. In truth, we have also been feeling quite conflicted about it and have not been able to make a decision. The eldest prince is composed and intelligent. Ever since he was young, given that he is the eldest son, we have kept him at our side to train him. His performance has never let me down. The second prince is smart, bold, and can occasionally be a little domineering, but he has never made any major missteps." Gu Huaijiang said, "Indeed, the two princes are exactly like your Majesty. No matter who is chosen as crown prince, they will definitely be able to govern Eastern Ling properly." Emperor Ning smiled and pointed at him. "Don't just say things to make us happy. We know that we are as average a ruler as is possible to be. Eastern Ling is wealthier than Western Kuan, has more fertile lands, and has a larger population. If we were a daring ruler, how could Western Kuan dare to try and invade our territory year after year?" Gu Huaijiang did not respond to this. To say anything further would just be empty flattery. He did not want to say it, and Emperor Ning did not want to hear it. After a long pause, Emperor Ning continued, "Even to this moment, we are conflicted, but this conflict between the two princes over the prime minister's position has finally allowed us to come to a clear conclusion. Regardless of who is more suitable to become the crown prince, we need to quickly recognize someone to keep the brothers from causing actual harm to each other over the position. That's why we hinted to Imperial Consort Xian that we never had any intention of naming the eldest prince as the crown prince." Gu Huaijiang felt his heart drop. He felt that this move was not good. It was no wonder Emperor Ning said that he wanted to console Imperial Consort Xian. If word of this reached the eldest prince, not only could this fail to have him give up on the position of crown prince, but it might make him feel resentful. Your Majesty's thinking is logical. Regardless of who is chosen, it would be best to make the decision quickly and allow the other one to quickly give up on the idea. This is the best choice. Emperor Ning nodded with a bit of joy. It's fortunate that there was this matter with Yin Yan, or we really would not have been able to figure this point out. Imperial Consort Xian has always been gentle and virtuous, and the eldest prince has been understanding. After we announce the second prince as the crown prince and provide their mothers with some comfort, things will likely be fine." Gu Huaijiang remained silent and did not respond. Emperor Ning turned his head and saw that he was looking at the flower buds on the tree. The buds had not yet bloomed, and the little bit of pink that appeared looked quite interesting when compared to a fully bloomed flower. Emperor Ning walked back with a smile. "Do you also like wintersweet flowers? This is a new type that was brought in from the north. They were only just planted before the end of the year. We thought that your Marquis Gu's manner, as people with military backgrounds, would not like looking at things like flowers. That's why I never sent any to you." When he brought this up, he suddenly remembered something. We forgot. This year, your manor has Yu Fu. That little girl probably likes these sorts of flowers. We will have someone send some to your manor, but to see flowers bloom, that will probably need to wait until next year." Gu Huaijiang cupped his hands in a salute. "Then I will thank your Majesty. It would also be fine to wait a year. After all, Yu Fu will surely still be there a year from now." Emperor Ning teased him. "That's right. The daughter will become the daughter-in-law. If you had such a plan, why didn't you tell me beforehand? It wasted our effort to try and match Shu Bai with Danyang. Who knew that you already had your eyes set on a daughter-in-law?" Hearing this tone, It seemed that he did not have any complaints about Gu Shubai and Yu Fu. Gu Huaijiang was a little embarrassed. I ask your majesty for forgiveness. This subject, there's no need to explain. We dote on our daughter, and you also dote on your daughter. Wanting to find her the best partner who is talented and handsome, we obviously understand. But we need to think a bit. Who would be a good choice for Danyang to marry? While Emperor Ning spoke, he continued to walk further into the winter-sweet garden. Gu Huaijiang stood behind him with his brow slightly furrowed. If the matter of naming a crown prince really was as simple as Emperor Ning had made it sound, that would be great. Unfortunately, whether it was Imperial Consort Xian or the eldest prince, neither were as understanding as he thought. Little Yu Fu, I heard some good news. Gui enthusiastically ran over to the western wing. Before even stepping inside, he began to shout. Yu Fu had already become accustomed to him acting this way and walked over from the corridor to say, "What good news? Western Kuin's special envoy will be returning to their country. Your junior disciple will also be leaving with them. Does this not count as good news?" Yu Fu was stunned. Kuin Wushang is leaving? She had wanted to ask why he would not let her know, but suddenly remembered that Kuin Wushang was completely unable to get close to Marquis Gu's manor. Even Yao Lan refused to help pass along anything that he said. How could he let her know? Gui seemed to be able to tell what she was thinking. I heard one of the soldiers in the manor say that he came on the night of the Lantern Festival, but was chased away before he could get close. Yu Fu said, "Wasn't that around the time that Prime Minister Yin resigned? It seems that he was planning to leave Eastern Ling at that time. No, there's something that I need to find him and ask him about." She quickly ran out of the western wing, while Gui shouted from behind, "Western Kuin's special envoy should have already left the city. How are you going to find him? Acting so hurriedly. What's making you so anxious?" Yu Fu ran out and bumped into Gu Shubai along the way. Fortunately, he caught her shoulder and kept her from falling down. What a nicely timed appearance. Yu Fu grabbed his sleeve. "Eldest brother, take me on a trip out of the manor. I will slowly tell you along the way." Outside the city gates, the eldest prince had been tasked with sending off Western Kuin's special envoy. The special envoys group gradually moved further and further away, and the eldest prince ordered for things to get tidied up. Just as he was about to return to the palace to report, he suddenly saw a fast horse riding out from the city. When the horse passed by the eldest prince, it suddenly stopped. Only then did he see that it was Gu Shubai and Yu Fu on the horse. "Eldest prince, has Western Kuin's special envoy left?" "They just left." "What happened?" Gu Shubai lifted the reins. "Yu Fu wants to send off her junior disciple. When we get the chance, we will tell eldest prince more. Farewell." After he finished speaking, he rode off. The eldest prince watched them ride off for a while before climbing into his carriage and returning into the city. Just after the special envoy left Linen, Kurin Wushang ordered the group to slow down. It seemed as though he was waiting for someone. Qigong had already become accustomed to his seemingly mindless actions and waved his hand. "Seventh prince has the most authority. Just listen to his orders. There's no need to ask me." Asking him would also be pointless. Could he possibly be more stubborn than Kuin Wushang? At worst, they would be unable to reach the next post station before nightfall, so it would be fine if they dawdled a little. Suddenly, they saw a cloud of dust draw closer from the direction of Linen. One of the guards outside said, "Seventh prince, it seems that there is a horse riding after us. Should we have someone go and take a look?" Kuin Wushang suddenly lifted the curtain. "It must be Yu Fu. Stop the carriage. Come to a complete stop." He stood on the shaft of the carriage and looked into the distance. The cloud of dust made it hard to see who was riding the horse, but he was certain that it was Yu Fu. That horse was drawing closer at a high speed, and Kurin Wushang saw the girl sitting in front of Gu Shubai. Wearing a peach-colored coat that covered her face, he could immediately tell that it was Yu Fu. Aside from her, what other girl would be able to ride Gu Shubai's horse? "Little senior disciple, I'm here." He, who was prideful and domineering toward the special envoy, now spoke to Yu Fu very sweetly. The words little senior disciple were said so smoothly that Qi Gan could hear them from inside the carriage and let out a faint snort. Gu Shubai dismounted his horse and helped Yu Fu down. Yu Fu said, "Are you returning to Western Kuan or Immortals Valley?" "I will be returning to my country to report to Father Emperor first before quickly returning to Immortals Valley. Do you have anything you want me to pass along to Master?" Yu Fu shook her head and handed him a small porcelain bottle. "Master and I have been exchanging letters. There's no need for you to pass along any messages. This bottle has a new medicine that I made. Every time that a disciple leaves the valley, they must develop a new medicine. Otherwise, Master will definitely believe that they got lazy and punish them. I figure that you haven't had much time to develop any new medicines while in Eastern Ling, right?" Kuan Wushang smiled foolishly. "Little senior disciple really treats me the best. What sort of medicine is this?" He opened the bottle and sniffed it. The smell was extremely strange, and he was unable to tell what it contained. It was made using herbs from Eastern Ling. It's natural that you can't tell what it is. It contains rose mallow, and it invigorates the mind and spirit. It is exceptional. What? Invigorates the mind and spirit? Kuan Wushang immediately let out a strange cry. "I am studying poisons in Immortals Valley. If I give Master a medicine that invigorates the mind and spirit, are you sure that he won't beat me to death?" Yu Fu rolled her eyes at him. "Do as you like." She turned her head to look at Gu Shubai, then dragged Kuan Wushang off to the side to speak. "Was it really In Shua who asked you for the poison?" "It was." "What poison did he want?" "Something hypertoxic that even you can't treat." "Ha." Yu Fu gently laughed. A poison that she could not treat. How could one be so easy to find? "Then why did you give him one that wasn't?" "I don't dare kill Gu Shubai." Yu Fu looked at him seriously. For the first time, she felt that the carefree Kuan Wushang had done something proper. "It's good as long as you know. Even if you managed to steal military secrets from Marquis Gu's manor, Emperor Ning would not care, and the head general would care even less. But if eldest brother died at your hands, they would not let you return to Western Kuan alive." Kuan Wushang smiled but did not speak. He was not afraid of Emperor Ning or Gu Huaijiang. He was just worried that Yu Fu would be sad if Gu Shubai died. The two chatted for a while, then walked back. Gu Shubai cupped his hands toward Kuan Wushang. "Regardless of your motive, I, Gu Shubai, will accept 7th Prince's kindness." Kuan Wushang did not respond with a kind look. "Even if it was kindness, it was for my little senior disciple. It has nothing to do with you." He climbed into the carriage and suddenly turned around. "But if you really want to repay this kindness, I would not mind. You just need to promise me that you will take care of her like a true older brother." He heavily emphasized the 3 words true older brother. Gu Shubai smiled and picked Yu Fu up around her waist to get back up on the horse. Provocatively looking at Kuan Wushang, he said, "Don't worry." Kuan Wushang's eyes were on the verge of shooting out flames. How could he feel at ease with this? Snow was falling heavily, and there was a carriage covered in a light blue tarp parked outside the Prime Minister's manor. In Yen removed his gold and purple hat, leaving just a hairpin. His purplish-red government uniform had also been swapped out for a plain cotton robe. People relied on clothes the same way that horses relied on saddles. Now that In Yen was dressed so plainly, he looked no different from the other old men in the city. Who could possibly imagine that such a In Yen had previously been the prestigious prime minister? In Shua and In Jiao sent him off. The steady son was able to contain himself, but the daughter was already hoarse from crying. "Father, can you really not wait until spring arrives before leaving? It's so cold outside, and the ground is still frozen. How can eldest brother and I feel at ease with knowing that you have returned to the old home in the Min province alone?" In Shua also said, "Although it is the old home, our In family has been serving as court officials for many generations. The old home would have been abandoned for a long time. If father leaves in such a rush, I fear that the old home would not have the time to tidy up properly." In Yen waved his hand, telling them that there was no need to continue. "I must leave quickly. His Majesty favors Marquis Gu's manor a great deal, and Gu Shubai nearly died. I only resigned to apologize for my crime, but there are quite a few senior officials in court who have resentments toward me and are very dissatisfied. If I don't quickly leave and anger His Majesty, it would not be good for the two of you." He raised his head and looked around. A cold snowflake snuck under his collar and landed on his neck, causing him to shiver. However, he slowly began to laugh. His Majesty's anger will only be reduced by hearing that it was such a cold day and that it was snowing so heavily. Do you two understand? The siblings silently nodded. Yin had always been strict. Who knew that he was thinking about the two of them at such a critical moment? Shua said, "Father, don't worry. When I establish myself in court and things calm down, I will definitely arrange for Father to be brought back from the Min province." Yin looked at him warmly. This son of his had always made him proud, and there was nothing that would make him feel uneasy. The one that made him feel uneasy was Jiao. "For your mother's grave, Father has already ordered for someone to erect a nameless monument. In the future, there won't be any need to worry about being unable to find it after a heavy snowfall. But her identity must remain hidden from all outsiders. You must not let it slip. Do you understand?" Her mother's grave would be unnamed, and there was no spirit tablet at home. Not even her name could be discovered by outsiders. Having a nameless grave was also good, for it was better than nothing. Hot tears welled up in Jiao's eyes. "Many thanks, Father." Daughter understands. Daughter definitely will not let anyone else know. Yin nodded his head, then turned to Shua. "You need to take good care of Jiao. When Father is not at the manor, you two will need to rely on each other. Father will only be able to feel at ease if you two siblings are united." Shua bowed and replied, "Father, do not worry. Son will definitely take good care of Jiao and calm the situation in court. I definitely will not allow Father's departure be in vain." The heavy snow continued to fall, and the carriage slowly departed, leaving a thin trail in the snow. In Yan's life, this was the first time that he had been in such a small carriage. He shrank down inside the carriage and slowly closed his eyes. He was squeezed into the carriage with his clothes and rations. Behind the carriage, Shua and Jiao were kneeling to send him off, only standing up after a long time. "Your Majesty has made a decree. The son of former Prime Minister Yin, Shua, is to succeed the position of Prime Minister. You will assist us and lead the court. All officials must work together to fulfill their duties, and negligence will not be tolerated. That's all." The spot of Prime Minister was granted, and the officials were all shocked. They initially thought that they would be able to see what His Majesty thought of the eldest prince and the second prince through this decree. Who knew that His Majesty would not choose anyone that had been recommended. Instead, he chose to grant the position to Shua directly. He was only 21 years of age, which made him the youngest prime minister in Easternling's history. It was truly shocking. But thinking about it carefully, he had already received training from His Majesty in court affairs, and Yin was his father. When it came to a prime minister's work, Shua could not be more familiar. Moreover, this person was thorough in his work, and he was popular in court. He was not as harsh or demanding as Yin. Thus he was suited to the position of prime minister. After court was dismissed, the eldest prince and the second prince had ugly looks on their faces. It was fortunate that His Majesty did not choose one of the people that they had recommended or one that the other had recommended. One of the officials moved to the eldest prince's side and quietly consoled him, "Eldest prince, don't worry. His Majesty had planned to have eldest young Sir Yin succeed Prime Minister Yin's position. It's not that he did not want to hear your recommendation." The eldest prince faintly smiled but declined to respond. The official did not understand. The eldest prince also could not say anything. Imperial consort Xian had called him to Qinghua Palace the day before and told him what His Majesty had told her. Mother and son sat face to face in silence. It was as though there was heavy snow falling in their hearts. It was ice-cold and blindingly white. Ning Zhao. It turned out that his name made it clear from the start that he never had a chance. Even if he put in years of hard work and effort, he had no chance of changing His Majesty's mind. At this time, Could it be that he would need to tell the officials who had supported him that His Majesty had already made up his mind and would be naming the second prince as crown prince? Even if he did not say it, the officials would find out sooner or later. Unless... The eldest prince raised his head and looked over to the other side, and the second prince also looked at him, giving him an unhappy look and leaving with a flick of his sleeves. That expression, could it be that he still did not know His Majesty's plan? That was also true. His Majesty had not yet announced it to the court. He had only revealed it to Imperial Consort Xian. Recently, the court had been busy with the task of filling the Prime Minister's position. It was natural that they needed to wait until the situation calmed down to bring up this matter. He suddenly smiled. Or perhaps this would be his final chance. After Yin Shuo took over the position of Prime Minister, his first order of business was to visit Marquis Gu's manor and apologize. My aging father is old and muddled, which led him to do something like make an attempt on the life of the eldest young sir. He personally confessed this, and His Majesty has handled it. Although my father has already resigned and returned to the Min province, the guilt is not so easily cleared. The son is responsible for their father's crimes. This is perfectly aligned with the heavenly principles. It's a given that I, as the son of the guilty, should come and apologize. He confessed to Yin Yan's guilt without concealing anything and came to kneel outside Marquis Gu's manor to apologize without showing any concern for his status as Eastern Ling's prime minister. Emperor Ning and the officials in court were quite moved, and any trace of suspicion toward Yin Shuo that carried over from Yin Yan's case had instantly vanished. It was not just them, as even Gu Huaijiang was extremely shocked by Yin Shuo's words. This person is by no means average, knowing when to stand tall and when to bow down. With Yin Yan having been forced to resign from his position, I fear that he will focus even more on establishing himself. It really is hard to imagine. Gu Shubai furrowed his brow. He thought about how Yin Shuo was kneeling outside to apologize, which meant that he would need to go outside, feign ignorance, and help him up with a smile. He remembered what was important and said, "The previous prime minister is the previous prime minister, and you are you. The guilt is not shared. I hope that general and prime minister will be able to reconcile in the future for the sake of the prosperity of Eastern Ling and its people." The guilt is not shared. His, Yin Shuo's, guilt was improperly attributed to Yin Yan. However, Gu Huaijiang told him that Eastern Ling's general and prime minister working in harmony was of the utmost importance. Before there was conclusive evidence, they could not voice their suspicions of Yin Shuo. He reached out and helped him up from the ground, and the two shook hands briefly before kindly letting go. Outsiders talked about how responsible Yin Shuo was. This was clearly a crime committed by his father, yet he did not try to hide from it and actually took the initiative to bring it up. They also spoke of how magnanimous Marquis Gu's manor was. The heir was nearly assassinated, yet they did not hold any grudges and worked with the Prime Minister's manor to improve their relationship. The Prime Minister and General were now united, and Eastern Ling would become even more prosperous. Nobody knew just how estranged they were when they shook hands. After that, the way that they looked at each other, it was as if they were separated by a vast river. Yin Shuo cupped his hands and bid farewell, a cold light flickering in his eyes when he turned around. Gu Shubai already knew. Gu Shubai watched him climb into his carriage and leave, and his smile slowly began to fade. Turning around, he walked back toward the manor. Yin Shuo knew that he already knew. With a new prime minister appointed, the turbulent atmosphere in court that everyone had expected was almost non-existent. Yin Shuo was a kind and amiable person but acted swiftly and resolutely in handling court affairs. He was able to establish himself in this position very quickly, which earned him repeated praise from Emperor Ning. Even all of the bad practices that had been around while Yin Yin was in this position were being uncovered and taken care of. The general and prime minister were getting along, and all of the officials, civil and military, were satisfied. The atmosphere in court was at an all-time high. Chengji, we did not choose the person that you recommended to become prime minister. Do you have any complaints for us? After the arrival of spring, the weather started to get warmer. The second prince had been called into the palace, and accompanied Emperor Ning on a stroll. This year's winter had multiple heavy snowfalls, and Emperor Ning felt a sudden cold. The imperial physicians advised him to go out and take a walk while it was clear out. It would be good for his health. The second prince respectfully followed behind him. What sort of thing is Father Emperor saying? Son would not dare to have any complaints about Father Emperor's decisions. Emperor Ning remained silent, and the second prince thought to himself that this was not good. He must have heard some rumors to ask him such a thing. He hurriedly took a couple of steps forward. When Sun heard that Father Emperor wanted Shua to succeed the position of Prime Minister, there was indeed some unhappiness. But Sun was not complaining about Father Emperor. Instead, I felt that the previous Prime Minister's guilt was too much. No matter how much Father Emperor favors his son, wouldn't Uncle Gu feel quite hurt? In the end, our Eastern Ling should rely more on Marquis Gu's manner. Emperor Ning slowed his pace before stopping and looking at him. Only after a while did he reveal a smile. On this, there's no need for you to worry. For something as important as the Prime Minister's position, it's natural that I asked for your Uncle Gu's thoughts. For you to have such apprehensions is a show of filial piety. Why not tell us directly? If you don't say anything, others will try and sow discord between us, and it made us think that you resented us. The second prince felt a chill in his heart. Who was it that tried to sow discord between us? As a prince, there are plenty of people with their eyes on you. You can't blame others for trying to sow discord. If you wish to blame someone, blame yourself for showing any resentment. Emperor Ning did not say it openly, but the second prince could guess who it was without even thinking. Aside from the eldest prince and his faction, who else would try and sow discord between him and Emperor Ning? He hastily cupped his hands and said, "Yes, Sun will learn from Father Emperor's teaching." Sun did not come directly to Father Emperor because Sun was also uncertain, fearing that Father Emperor would laugh at my foolishness. It has been many years since Mother Empress passed away, and Sun's manor is away from the palace, thus there is not much reason to come into the palace. I am also unlike my brother, the eldest prince, who has his imperial consort mother in the palace to visit from time to time. Emperor Ning furrowed his brow. Nonsense. Your mother empress is no longer here, but your father emperor is still here. What? Would others dare to say anything if you came to visit your father emperor from time to time? The second prince lowered his head and fell silent. Emperor Ning changed his tone. Forget it. What you said is not wrong. An adult prince who frequently visits the palace and stays with us will inevitably invite wild speculation from outsiders. But you must know that it's because your and Danyang's mother empress is no longer around that we dote on you two a little more. That we did not promote a second empress after all of these years. You should understand the reason. He dotingly patted the second prince's hand, and the second prince raised his head, looking at him in shock. Where is the princess? The second prince strode into the western palace. He was surrounded in such a joyous aura that even the palace maids could tell. Immediately after setting foot inside the palace, he began looking for Princess Danyang. It looked like he had some good news to tell her. One of her personal maids, Tianer, said, replying to second prince, "Princess is in the inner room. Please have some tea, while this servant goes to report. Go quickly. Tell Danyang that I have some good news to share." The second prince clenched his fist with emotion. He placed his hands on the table and left some damp spots on the light yellow covering. It was only then that he realized that he was so nervous that his palms were sweaty. Tianer brought out a cup of tea and noticed the wet patches left by his palms. Her mouth opened slightly in shock as she quietly retreated from the room. What sort of joyous event had just occurred? She had served at Princess Danyang's side for many years, thus she had a decent understanding of the second prince, yet she had never seen him so flustered before. "Second brother, what sort of good news could make you so excited?" With the sound of the bead curtains, Princess Danyang lazily walked out. Her hair was down, and she looked as if she had just woken up. Father Emperor handed the position of Prime Minister to Shua, and second brother does not have much of a relationship with him. This isn't anything good. Could it be that second brother has some method to get along with this new prime minister? The second prince mockingly laughed. Who cares who holds the position of prime minister? Even if Yin Shuo was part of Yi Zhao's faction, this prince does not care. Princess Danyang looked at him seriously and suddenly had a strange feeling. She pushed the second prince's hand and found that his palms were wet with sweat. What exactly is this good news? Second brother, quickly tell me. The second prince looked around, and Tian'er understandingly waved her hand, leading the palace maids and eunuchs out of the room. The doors were closed, and Princess Danyang looked at him expectantly. He smiled and said, "The wish that you and I have had for many years has finally been realized. None of our efforts were wasted. It was only today that I realized that there's no point in competing with Yi Zhao for the support of the court's officials. The most important person is still Father Emperor." Princess Danyang was both shocked and joyous. Father Emperor wants to appoint you as the crown prince? He still has not for the time being, but it should be soon. The second prince cheerfully picked up his cup of tea and gently blew away some of the bubbles at the surface of the tea. Father Emperor called me into the palace today and asked me to accompany him on a walk around the palace. As we walked, we arrived at Mother Empress' former palace. Take a guess. What do you think Father Emperor said to me? What did he say? He said that we did not promote a second empress after all of these years. You should understand the reason. Princess Danyang furrowed her brow, not knowing what these words meant. The second prince said, Danyang, do you still not understand? Imperial consort Xian has been managing the inner palace on Mother Empress' behalf all of these years, pretending to be virtuous and benevolent. If Father Emperor wanted to appoint Ning Yi Zhao as the crown prince, he would have appointed her as the empress. That would be the proper way of doing things. But Father Emperor never did it, and Imperial consort Xian remains an imperial consort. She could not become the empress and will never end up the empress dowager. Princess Danyang seemed to have reached a revelation and joyously grabbed his hand. Since Father Emperor revealed his intentions to you, has he told you when he plans to prepare the crown prince's palace? The second prince smiled. There's no rush. The court just had a new prime minister appointed, and the situation in court is unstable. It will be a bit longer before Father Emperor can begin preparing the crown prince's palace. When the situation starts to calm down, how much longer would it take to prepare the crown prince's palace? Princess Danyang hugged his arm and cheerfully said, I knew it. Second brother is the son that Mother Empress gave birth to. Thus the crown prince's position would definitely belong to you. Just looking at the names, it was immediately clear. Father Emperor chose the name Chengji for you. With the blessing of the heavens, provide peace and prosperity for the country. If it wasn't you, who else could it be? The second prince patted her head. He showed some rare kindness to his younger sister from the same mother. Mother Empress is no longer around. We siblings have relied on each other for survival for many years. Now, we've finally made it. But we can't tell anyone about this for now to keep Ning Yi Zhao's faction from finding out and causing trouble. I understand. Second brother, I will be going out of the palace. Tian'er, quickly prepare this princess clothes. Princess Danyang immediately wanted to run into the inner room but was grabbed by the second prince. What are you going out at a time like this for? I am going to look for Brother Shu Bai. The second prince furrowed his brow. I only just said that you can't tell anyone. Have you put any consideration into my words? All you think about all day is Brother Shu Bai this, Brother Shu Bai that. Have you already forgotten that your brother Shu Bai was almost engaged to another girl? Thinking a little, he chose not to say the most hurtful last part. Princess Danyang's eyes were filled with joy. Second brother, when did you become so overly cautious? Could it be that you've forgotten that Father Emperor would definitely have sought out Marquis Gu prior to making as big a decision as appointing a crown prince? Brother Shu Bai probably already knows about it. After saying this, she rushed into the inner room. The second prince just listened to her tell the palace maids to look for clothes and a hairpin. What she said was indeed true. Emperor Ning even asked Gu Huaijiang when it came to something like appointing a new prime minister, much less something like appointing a crown prince. Marquis Gu's manor had always maintained a neutral stance, neither supporting him nor the eldest prince. There was nothing for him to feel uneasy about. He flicked his sleeve and left the Western Palace. Behind a tall column nearby, someone dressed like a palace maid clearly heard the second prince's conversation. She looked around and saw that there were no others nearby. Turning around and leaving the Western Palace, she walked toward the inner palace. The situation in court was trending towards being stable, and Marquis Gu's manor was also able to relax a great deal. Gu Huijiang had less work, and Gu Shubai had much more free time. Thus he would go and visit Yu Fu every day in the Western Wing. Today, just after setting foot in the Western Wing, he felt that the atmosphere was a little off. It felt a little too quiet. He walked through the middle of the courtyard. The maidservant who came to greet him looked a little familiar and bowed very happily upon seeing him. "Eldest young sir, you've come?" Gu Shubai hesitated for a moment. "Yao Hong?" Qi Ting's expression became a little ugly, replying to "Eldest young sir, Auntie Li has already decided to return my original name. This servant is Qi Ting." This was true. She was now a maidservant who handled physical labor, while Yao Lan was Yu Fu's personal maidservant. It would not be fitting for the two to share a name. Gu Shubai nodded his head and headed straight toward the room. Originally, Qi Ting had been quite happy to have been able to regain her original name. At the very least, when they heard her name, they would think of giving Qian and Qizhou a bit of face, thus they would not treat her too poorly. But based on Gu Shubai's earlier expression, it seemed that he was saying that she was not worthy of sharing Yao Lan's name. This made her feel humiliated. It was all Yu Fu's fault. If not for her, how could these young sirs who had previously treated her so politely now ignore her? She resentfully snorted and absent-mindedly walked forward. Suddenly, she tripped into a puddle on the ground. With this splash, the maidservants working nearby looked over and began to laugh. Granny Lu walked over with her hands on her hips. "I say, Qi Ting, how can you be so stupid? This puddle has been there for so many days, and everyone else has been able to avoid it. You're the only one to fall into it." She loathingly waved her finger in front of her nose. "Why haven't you quickly gone to get changed to return to work? Are you wanting to slack off?" Qi Ting's face turned red from the humiliation. Bowing, she retreated and heard Granny Lu sarcastically lament. "Every time that the young sirs come, she just tries to be seductive. She doesn't even look at herself. How could the young sirs be willing to look at her? Why is it so quiet today? What are you looking at?" Yu Fu sat in the rear corridor while holding Pangjiu in her lap and a letter in her hand. The room was quiet, and Gu Shubai entered without making a sound, which gave her a fright. "Eldest brother, why did you sneak in so quietly? My martial ability is not as good as everyone else's, so I couldn't hear your footsteps." Gu Shubai looked around. Strange. Where are all of this room's maidservants? Just as he said this, someone responded from the inner room. "Eldest young sir, please wait a moment. I will bring the tea out shortly." It was Yao Lan's voice. Yu Fu patted the spot next to her, gesturing for him to sit down. "Head General said that he wanted to have some new accessories made and told me to pick what I like. He would then pass along the designs to the craftsman. I was thinking about what sorts of hairstyles I have and matching the accessories to them. All of these things are taken care of by Lin Zhu, so I just left it to her to take a look." The two younger ones, Yin Ling and Yin Shui, said that they wanted to go too, and I have no clue where Lin Bai went, which leaves Yao Lan on her own. Yao Lan came out with a cup of tea. Young Miss was reading a letter in the rear corridor, and I noticed that young Miss had not touched her medicine kit in a while. I went to tidy it up and did not notice eldest young sir come in. Gu Shubai received the tea. "Who is the letter from?" Yu Fu handed the letter to him. "Here." Kuan Wushang left a letter to me at the post house. Before he left, he could not find me, and he did not think that we would leave the city to chase after him. This letter was sent, and Yao Lan forgot about it, only remembering to give it to me today. Yao Lan stuck out her tongue and said somewhat guiltily, "The medicine kit still hasn't been fully tidied. If young miss and eldest young sir need anything, just call me." After saying this, she immediately ducked into the inner room. Gu Shubai looked at the letter. It was nothing more than a standard parting letter. At most, it reminded Yu Fu to be careful of Gu Shubai. Gu Shubai is already 21 years old, and you are only 13 years old. When you get a little older, he will no longer be the most attractive man in linen. Little senior disciple, do not be so hasty. Wait until you become of age before deciding anything. You must not be deceived by that old man. The corner of Gu Shubai's mouth twitched. This was the first time that he had been described as an old man. Kuan Wushang seemed to be a year younger. This really was the pot calling the kettle black. Yu Fu could tell what part he was reading based on his expression. Covering her mouth, she laughed off to the side. Men understand men the best. A little girl like you would not understand. You absolutely must take care of yourself, and don't let him do anything sneaky. The more someone acts dignified, the more beastly they actually are. Based on this, someone, like him, who looked like a beast was actually a good person. Gu Shubai had grounds to support his views, and was about to tell Yu Fu that there was no need to read such nonsense, but he was suddenly drawn to the last part of the letter. In truth, when In Shuo came to me for the poison, I had wanted to kill Gu Shubai. The reason that I did not hand over the hypertoxic poison is that I was worried that you would be sad. But there's no need to thank me. As a prince of Western Kuan, it's possible that I am destined to do some things that will make you sad. Destined to do some things that would make Yu Fu sad? He carefully thought over these words, not understanding what they fully meant. He then looked at Yu Fu, and the latter shook her head. I was deep in thought earlier precisely because of these words. The thing that Kuan Wushang would do, what exactly would it be? Before Gu Shubai could think about it carefully, he suddenly heard someone report, "Eldest young sir, Princess Danyang has come and is currently waiting for you in the main hall." Princess Danyang was sipping tea while seated in the main hall. Wearing lavish clothes, her flowing red dress fell to the sides of the chair. Her embroidered shoes were hidden below said dress, and she sat there with a reserved and noble air. She was Easternling's princess and the only one born from the empress. But it was only after hearing the news from the second prince that she realized what sort of pride and what sort of nobility she should have as the princess born of the empress. Taking a sip of tea, she slowly loosened the grip of her smooth and pale fingers and gracefully rested her hands on her knees. Qizhou was stationed outside the room and quickly glanced at her. This was not the first time that Princess Danyang had come to the Marquis Manor, but for some reason, he felt that today's Princess Danyang was a little different. Hearing the sound of familiar footsteps, Princess Danyang was about to stand up to welcome them, but suddenly remembered something and just smoothed out her clothes to make herself look prettier. Gu Shubai walked toward her and cupped his hands. "Princess?" Only now did she stand up and curtsied. "Brother Shubai?" Gu Shubai looked around and saw that the second prince was not present. Princess Danyang would always come with the second prince, or with the young misses from other noble families. Why was it that she had come on her own today? It did not look like she had come on a whim. Does Princess have something to say? Princess Danyang was thinking about what idle chat she could start with to avoid revealing what she had come to say too abruptly. Who knew that Gu Shubai would immediately see through her plan? She immediately became discouraged. Even if in the eyes of others, she was the noblest princess, in Gu Shubai's eyes, she may as well save herself the effort. In front of him, she was completely unable to hide the truth. "Brother Shubai, it's stuffy inside. The weather is quite nice outside, and I recall that the Marquis Manor has a newly constructed greenhouse. The flowers inside must already be blooming, right?" This greenhouse had just been built before the end of the year. Gu Huijiang had heard that girls liked flowers and remembered that Marquis Gu's manor only had trees and not much in the way of flowers. Thus he quickly ordered the construction of this greenhouse. Like this, even during the cold winter days, there could still be some flowers in bloom. Princess Danyang was absolutely elated about this. With this greenhouse, she would have one more excuse to visit Marquis Gu's manor more often in the future. Gu Shubai hesitated for a moment before turning sideways and giving way. "It's in the backyard." "Princess, this way." The two walked toward the backyard, with Princess Danyang walking in the front and Gu Shubai staying 3 steps behind her. She tried many times to slow her pace, but Gu Shubai would also slow his pace. It seemed that he had no intention of getting close to her. She was becoming quite disheartened, but she completely forgot all about this when she saw the greenhouse. The entire greenhouse was made of wood and was extremely large. Walking in, it was like setting foot in a sea of flowers, as there were many flowers already blooming. The warm and humid air gave it a spring-like feeling. As people walked around inside, they would feel the warmth of spring surrounding them. She could not stop herself from looking up. It turned out that this greenhouse was not just warm at ground level, as there were lamps hanging up above. Those lamps were very large. Who knew what sort of exquisite work was done such that they shone in a way that mimicked the sun? It was a sight to behold. Uncle Gu is someone with a military background and has always lived a simple life with little extravagance. It's truly hard to imagine that he would devote so much manpower and money on cultivating flowers. As Princess Danyang spoke, she reached out a hand to gently touch a bunch of tender yellow peonies, a smile appearing on her face. Since time immemorial, warriors have liked swords, and beauties have liked flowers. Princess Danyang was no different. Gu Shubai said, "If this was in the past, father naturally would not do this sort of thing. But ever since the arrival of Yu Fu, he started doing all of this. His Majesty rewards Marquis Gu's manor year after year, and that silver finally had a place to be spent." Her hand froze in mid-air. Thinking of how she could only see this sea of flowers thanks to Yu Fu, she momentarily pulled her hand back. No matter how she looked, that bunch of peonies was no longer beautiful. Uncle Gu really dotes on Yu Fu. Being doted on as a young miss of Marquis Gu's manor for a lifetime, how nice is that? If Yu Fu ends up as eldest young sir's wife, she will also become the Marquis wife. Would that not be hard on her? Gu Shubai simply said, "Yu Fu can't possibly remain a young miss of the Marquis manor for a lifetime. She will eventually need to get married. If she was to become the madam of some other family and no longer had the protection of father and us brothers, I fear that it would be even harder on her." Princess Danyang's voice became cold as she boldly said, "But the wife of the heir to Marquis Gu's manor, that is a position unlike any other. Since time immemorial, marriages have always been between families of equal standing. Though Yu Fu is nice, she does not have the support of her family's status. In the future, she will not be able to provide Marquis Gu's manor with any assistance. If anything were to happen to Marquis Gu's manor, she would not have any family to support her. Isn't that right?" The corners of Gu Shubai's mouth twitched. "How does Yu Fu not have any support? My Marquis Gu's manor is her support. This support, does Princess feel that it is insufficient?" Princess Danyang anxiously said, "Brother Shubai, you're only thinking about her. Why don't you think about yourself a little? If the madam of the heir to Marquis Gu's manor was the younger sister of the crown prince, that would truly provide Yu Fu with protection and peace of mind. Father Emperor has already decided to appoint second brother as the crown prince. Uncle Gu must have already told you about it, right?" Princess Danyang bit her lower lip. She had already made herself very clear. Would Gu Shubai still not understand? A tall shrub in the corner of the greenhouse suddenly moved, as a girl with divine beauty came out from behind the shrub. She looked at Princess Danyang and smiled brightly. If the wife of the heir to Marquis Gu's manor is the direct descendant of Immortal's Valley and has the ability to control whether people live or die, that would truly provide protection and peace of mind. The person who came out from behind the shrubs was Yu Fu. Coincidentally, both she and Princess Danyang were wearing red dresses. The two stood face to face, and Princess Danyang immediately felt less confident. Her dress was both more glamorous and more extravagant than Yu Fu's, yet she still felt less confident. It was a feeling of wanting to take a step back and hide. Yu Fu's clothes had a simple style. Naturally, the fabric was of exceptional quality, but the clothes did not look very new. They looked like something that she casually wore at home. Her hair had also been tied up very casually. A few stray tufts of hair rested on her shoulder. As a whole, she looked both very relaxed and very divine. By contrast, this made Princess Danyang's careful preparation look small-minded. Her face turned red, and she used a rebuke to cover up her weakness. How can you hide and eavesdrop on other people's conversations? That's too unprincipled. Suddenly, an old servant walked out from behind the greenhouse while holding a potted dwarf pine. "Young miss, I've kept you waiting." This old servant went out back for a long time, but this was the only one that looks close. "How about you draw its likeness, and this old servant will send someone out tomorrow to look for it." "There's no need." Yu Fu received the potted dwarf pine and said with a smile, "Uncle Ding, it's clear that you've worked with plants for many decades. You have good eyes. This plant isn't exactly like I described, but it looks much better. I will take this plant instead." It turned out that she had been in the greenhouse for quite some time and was just waiting for someone to give her something. Princess Danyang's expression turned even uglier. Thinking back to the shameless things that she had just said to Gu Shubai and how Yu Fu had heard all of it, she hated that she could not have Yu Fu disappear immediately. Gu Shubai walked over with a smile and looked at the dwarf pine. "What made you think of coming here to look for a bonsai?" Yu Fu said, "After you left, I had nothing to do and got bored. Thinking of how the head general mentioned that his room was lacking a bit of greenery, thus I thought of looking for some flowers or plants that might be fitting. After a bit of thought, I felt that a pine tree would fit head general's tastes, so I came to the greenhouse to look around. Who knew that while waiting for Uncle Ding, you two would enter while chatting? How could I possibly just jump in and speak up?" These words sounded a little jealous, but listening carefully, there was nothing to truly grasp onto. Gu Shubai felt his heart itch and wished that he could just ask her about it. Unfortunately, there was an outsider here. Yu Fu saw his expression and knew that based on his martial ability, he already knew that she was standing nearby in the shrubs. He deliberately remained quiet. Was he wanting her to prove something to him, or was he waiting for some sort of reaction? Humph. It seemed that there was some logic to Kuan Wushang's words. Whenever he became mischievous, he could rope everyone into his plot. It was only now that Steward Ding noticed Gu Shubai and Princess Danyang, hastily cupping his hands in a salute. "Eldest young sir, princess, have you two also come looking for flowers?" Gu Shubai said, "Uncle Ding, there's nothing to worry about here. You can go. We are just looking around." "Very well. If eldest young sir has any orders, just call out. This old servant will be behind the greenhouse." Steward Ding said this and retreated, leaving the three behind. The atmosphere instantly became stuffy. Princess Danyang decided to make a bad situation worse. "Yu Fu, you know that I like Brother Shubai, but since you are still young, do you know what it means to really like someone? If you truly like someone, you want to do everything possible to help them out. Although Marquis Gu's manner is prominent, there are also many who are envious of it. If you really want to do something for Brother Shubai's benefit, you should have him marry someone who is able to help Marquis Gu's manor." Yu Fu said, "How does Princess know that I can't provide Marquis Gu's manor with any benefits?" "Very well, even if I can't, how can Princess be so certain that you can provide Marquis Gu's manor with benefits?" Princess Danyang was momentarily speechless as Yu Fu continued. "Not to mention how the Crown Prince's position has not yet been announced, but even if it had, that does not necessarily mean that he will become the future ruler of Eastern Ling. However, my Marquis Gu's manor has always been relied upon and rewarded for its military exploits. When has it ever needed to marry the princess of its country for more influence? Could it be that princess words mean that you do not feel that the second prince will be a good ruler and will rely on this marriage rather than rely on subjects who have made great contributions?" Gu Shubai stood off to the side. It was very rare for him to hear Yu Fu speak at such length, so he found this quite entertaining. Especially when she said, "my Marquis Gu's manor." Yu Fu said those words so fluidly that he felt even more comfortable. This made it clear that Yu Fu already saw Marquis Gu's manor as her home. Princess Danyang had been completely rebuffed. She never thought that she would be told off to such a degree. When had she ever said that the second prince would rely on the marriage and not on his subjects? But was the situation in court not always like this? Relying solely on military contributions and ignoring the complicated court situation, How could one retain their influence? Marquis Gu's manor enjoyed its prestige right now, but there was no guarantee that they could maintain it in the future. I am a princess. Why would I bother arguing over such things with a little girl? Brother Shubai, think things through carefully. After saying this, she did not dare to listen to Gu Shubai's answer and left the greenhouse. Gu Shubai did not even look at her. He was just looking at Yu Fu with something on his mind. He did not know Yu Fu's identity for certain, but the possibility of her being Western Kuan's princess had already been eliminated because Kuan Wushang had openly expressed his feelings for Yu Fu. They definitely were not the feelings an older brother felt for a younger sister. As long as she was not the princess of an enemy country, it was fine. Even if Yu Fu was just a commoner, he was perfectly happy. Princess Danyang had been chased off in a huff, and Yu Fu let out a long sigh. It turned out that she was just a paper tiger, only daring to bare her fangs in front of outsiders. When it was just Gu Shubai present, she revealed her true nature. Eldest brother, was I really fierce just now? Princess Danyang looked very angry. No matter what she said, Gu Shubai would fully support her and said, not at all. In fact, you were very reasonable. Appointing people through favoritism is not the way of a good ruler, and Marquis Gu's manor looks down on currying favor with the imperial family. Princess Danyang wanted to use this to try and force me to give in, but it seems that she's underestimating our Marquis Gu's manor a little too much while overestimating the second prince a little too much. Yu Fu was right. The second prince had not yet become the crown prince, and even if he was, there was no guarantee that he would become Eastern Ling's emperor. It was also no wonder that Princess Danyang was in such a rush. She was already 16 years of age. Other girls had already gotten married by this age, or were at least engaged. As the princess born of the empress, she could not reach her goal but would not settle for any less, which resulted in her having delayed it until this moment. As long as she could get over this point and no longer hope that Gu Shubai would change his mind, she would quickly get married and start having children. Yu Fu thought back to what Princess Danyang had said. In truth, what she said was also reasonable. Marquis Gu's manor conducts itself properly, remaining loyal to the ruler and nobody else. While His Majesty and head general have a good relationship, it's inevitable that he will occasionally feel a little suspicious. In the future, regardless of which prince takes the throne, there is no guarantee that they will trust Marquis Gu's manor as much as His Majesty currently does. If there is a connection through marriage, it's natural that things would be significantly better. As she reached the end, she raised her head to look at Gu Shubai. Eldest brother, are you not at all moved by that? I am a little. Gu Shubai wanted to tease her a little, but I thought about it and feel that it would be more beneficial if the wife of the heir to Marquis Gu's manor was a direct descendant of Immortal's Valley, someone who could control whether people lived or died. Yu Fu's face immediately turned red. Were those not the words that she had just used to scare off Princess Danyang? He even remembered it word for word. She simply decided to hug the dwarf pine tree and walk toward the greenhouse's exit, completely ignoring him. Gu Shubai took the pot that she was carrying. All right, I won't tease you anymore. Do you know why father never wanted to remarry? Of course, Yu Fu knew. It's because head general had profound feelings for his first wife. I heard many people talk about it. Gu Shubai nodded. Father is a loving person, and he has always taught us this. He would never rush us to get married, nor would he say that we have to marry someone from a powerful family. Instead, he said that we should find the girl that we want to spend the rest of our lives with. Gu Huaijiang held a high position but had no wishes or desires. This was the only thing that he held firm on. For this, he did not hesitate to refuse His Majesty's proposals. Yu Fu emotionally said, Head General naturally has the character of a head general. This character was one worthy of being imitated by those of the younger generation. Gu Shubai said, That's why there's no need for you to worry about these insignificant matters. Father likes you the most. In his eyes, you would be his first choice for daughter-in-law. Who would worry about that? Yu Fu's small face turned red, and she ran off to hide this. She had just wanted to ask. She really was not worried about it. Gu Shubai chased after her. Yu Fu, slow down a little and wait for me. Yu Fu turned her head. The potted plant that Gu Shubai was holding was unsteady, and he fell to the ground to protect it. Eldest brother, are you hurt anywhere? She hastily ran over to help him up, and the corners of Gu Shubai's lips curled up to reveal a smile. I'm fine. I just wanted to you hold my hand. He grabbed Yu Fu's hand and stood up at the same time. Ignoring any protests, he held her hand and walked toward the main hall. Yu Fu tried to get free a couple of times but could not get away, so she just allowed her hand to be held. Either way, everyone in the manor knew that Gu Huaijiang wanted them to get married. Yin Zhang and the other military officers were even more direct, calling Yu Fu young madam whenever they saw her. Of course, they did not dare say it in front of Gu Shubai. He was still very protective of Yu Fu's reputation. If he heard, Yin Zhang was sure to be caned. Yu Fu, since you've picked a bonsai for father, how about you pick one for me? I'll put it on my desk and look at it every day. How about it? Yu Fu had already thought it through. Sure, eldest brother's desk should have a scented Solomon's. The plant was hardy, and the name contained part of Yu Fu's name. It was natural that Gu Shubai would like it. She continued, I picked a plant for everyone to add a bit of greenery to everyone's rooms. Their moods will naturally improve. Isn't that right? Gu Shubai's brow rose slightly and stopped to ask her. Then what have you decided on for second brother? Second brother's room should have cherry blossoms. Unfortunately, cherry blossoms have not yet bloomed during this season, so I guess daffodils would be better? Daffodils were flowers that bloomed during this season. Gu Shubai nodded and said, Second brother has had many cherry blossoms, so there is indeed no need to place any more. Daffodils are good. Daffodils represent steering clear of immorality. If third brother saw them, he would definitely feel very gratified. Yu Fu did not understand the hidden meaning behind his words. She just heard him mention Gu Hanemo and said, third brother's room should have a pomegranate tree. His room is so cold that it's like the snow. Adding a bit of red would make it look a little warmer. Second young sir, young Miss Yu Fu has ordered someone deliver a flower. Gu Jiugu was in his room writing a letter and suddenly heard this report from the servant. Quickly bring it in. It turned out to be some daffodils that were being raised in a blue and white porcelain pot. Some of them were already blooming, and some were still just buds. Why did Yu Fu suddenly decide to send him flowers? He asked the servant, is it just for me? Or did everyone get one? Everyone got one. It's just that everyone got something different. Master was given a dwarf pine. The eldest young sir received a scented Solomon seal, and second young sir received daffodils. Gu Jiugu was feeling triumphant. Everyone else got trees, while I am the only one to receive flowers. It seems that little Yu Fu really favors her second brother. The servant raised his head. Eldest young sir said that the daffodils represent steering clear of immorality, so sending them to second young sir is perfect. Gu Jiugu. Gu Jiugu placed the potted daffodils on his desk, liking them no matter how he looked at them. These flowers sure are white. I recall daffodils having another name. They're called fairy over ripples, right? These flowers sure are fragrant. The room has been filled with their fragrance after such a short span of time. These flowers sure are pretty. Standing to the side, the servant Zhong Xia was no longer able to endure. Second young sir, this isn't the first time that you've seen daffodils. Is there a need for this? Gu Jiugu rolled his eyes at him. What do you know? These are daffodils that Yu Fu sent. Zhong Xia lowered his head and muttered. They were clearly raised in the greenhouse. What are you muttering? It's nothing. Gu Jiugu stood up. I will be going out. Take good care of it. You absolutely must not let them die. Huh, I'm taking care of them? Zhong Xia had a clueless expression. Second young sir, I don't know how to take care of flowers. It would be one thing if they were planted in dirt, but I am even more clueless when they're planted in water. Gujiogo was almost at the door before turning back. If you don't know how, just go to the greenhouse and ask stewarding. Could it be that you want me to teach you? After saying this, he tapped his folding fan on his hand and left the room. Zhong Xia suddenly remembered something and rushed out to shout, "Second young sir, where are you going?" "The city's outskirts. I will definitely be back before dark." He replied without turning back and just waved to Zhong Xia with his folding fan. Zhong Xia began muttering once more, "It's such a cold day," yet he still went out with a folding fan. The second young sir really is becoming showier and showier. Gu Jiogu left the city on horseback on his own just outside of Linen. There was a barren mountain. It was tall, and the beautiful snow that fell there would not begin melting until all of the snow in the city had melted. He remembered that there was no snow piled up in Linen City during the Lantern Festival. Thus, In Jiao's mother's grave that had been buried under the snow could only be in such a place. He rode his horse around the mountain and began searching. In recent days, the days had started getting warmer. Ice and snow were starting to melt, and the scenery of the mountain was fully visible. He rode his horse past a great number of graves, and he carefully avoided the shorter graves, fearing that trotting on the graves would be disrespectful to the dead. Fortunately, though the graves were short, there were wooden and stone headstones, which marked their locations. If In Jiao's mother's grave could be covered by snow, it would definitely be a grave that was without a headstone. Thinking of this point, his search became much easier. He only needed to look at the graves that were unmarked. Suddenly, a stone headstone that had no name on it caught his eye. Straight, to be able to afford a stone headstone, it would be impossible that they would leave the name unwritten. For there to be one without a name, there definitely had to be some reason. He hopped off of his horse and walked over to that grave. The headstone was made of veined limestone. It was something that only a wealthy family could afford, so it was very strange for it to be placed on such a small grave. There were also 3 sticks of incense in front of the grave, and Gu Jiogui pinched the incense and found that it was a very expensive type. Just as he was feeling confused, he suddenly heard the sound of footsteps coming from the foot of the mountain. Leading his horse, he hid in the forest nearby. The ones to come up the mountain were 2 middle-aged men and a young maidservant. Based on the sound of their footsteps, it sounded like they were normal people without any martial arts training. "We have worked for the Prime Minister's manor for a long time. Will the young miss still not believe us? She even sent a young girl such a long distance to check. Look at how difficult this mountain path is, right?" The maidservant said, "This matter is important. It's not that the young miss doesn't believe you. Rather, it's just what she felt was necessary to fulfill her filial duties." The other man said, "Yes, yes, yes. If you personally come to take a look, the young miss will feel at ease." "That's good too." Their voices drew closer and closer as Gu Jiogu hid behind some trees and saw them walk over to the strange headstone. The maidservant touched the headstone. This headstone is of exceptional quality. Although it can't be engraved, it should be enough to comfort the young miss. It's just that when Master was in the capital, he disliked it when the young miss came out to pay her respects. Now that the eldest young sir is the head of the family, he is even more adamant about not letting young miss out of the city. "Thank you to the 2 of you for coming on Tomb Sweeping Day to offer some incense for the young Miss Birth Mother." As she said this, she pulled out a couple pieces of silver from her sleeve and handed the 2 men 1 piece each. The 2 men had received their reward and hastily replied, "Mrs. Wright, when the previous Prime Minister was still around, he advised us of this. How could we dare be negligent? The identity of the young Miss Birth Mother is a secret and has not been revealed to the outside world, but she is still considered our master. It's natural that we would not dare to be negligent." The maidservant nodded. "Don't worry. I will inform the young miss of your loyalty and have her say a few words to the young master. There won't be any shortage of benefits for you." "Hee, many thanks. Now, the young master is the Prime Minister. With just a word from him, we will definitely be thankful for the benefits provided by the young miss." In the end, she bowed toward the headstone before heading back down the mountain. After the three left, Gu Jiugu walked out of the forest and carefully looked over the blank headstone. Sure enough, In Jiyao's birth mother was not Madamine. Based on what those three said, she was born of a concubine. Just how important was her identity that In Yin would try so hard to hide it? He spoke to himself and suddenly felt a cold wind blow past. The sky was slowly getting darker. Forget it, he would return to the city first and tell his father before giving this matter more thought. He hopped back on his horse, descended the mountain, and rushed toward the city. You're saying that In Jiyao is not the child of Madamine, and you are sure of this? Gu Huaijiang was in the outer study taking care of some court matters, and Gu Shubai was also present. Hearing Gu Jiuge's words, they felt a little caught off guard. In Yin had always been known for having few interests, fully devoting himself to loyally serving the emperor without any desires. Aside from the madam of the prime minister's manor, there were no concubines. Later on, Madame Yin passed away, and he never remarried. Unlike when Gu Huaijiang decided not to remarry, In Yan's decision was mockingly seen as fake by people in court. They all said that he did it to seem virtuous and to pretend to be a saint. Even a sage needed affection. Distancing himself from others ended up making him appear fake. This was quite strange, as In Yin did not want to remarry, so how could he be hiding a concubine? Gu Jiugu said, "Father, on the night of the Lantern Festival, I left the manor to look for eldest brother and the others, and I happened to run into young Miss Yin. A seed of doubt was planted on that night, and I went out today to investigate. Who knew that I would run into people from the Prime Minister's manor? If not for this, Sun would not dare believe it." Gu Shubai said, "You are certain that you heard them say that her identity had to be kept secret?" Gu Jiugu nodded. "I am. Could it be that her birth mother was the daughter of an official convicted of a crime or was a prostitute, and that's why the previous prime minister always kept it hidden, fearing that it would ruin his reputation?" This was possible, but Gu Shubai felt that this matter was not so simple. Gu Huaijiang said, "A prostitute is not too likely. In Yin and I have known each other for many years, and he never went to any brothels. His manor doesn't even have any dancers or singers." Saying it like that, the possibilities had been drastically reduced. Gu Shubai said, "If she's the daughter of a criminal, the Imperial Court of Justice will have some records. Sun will try and investigate a little. Although this is an internal matter for the Prime Minister's manor, and we should never have inserted ourselves into this matter, I feel that In Shuwa taking the position of Prime Minister will be bad for our Marquis Gu's manor. If we can get any sort of a handle on the Prime Minister's manor, we definitely won't need to be so passive." Gu Jiugu added, "I agree with eldest brother's way of thinking. Father, just leave this matter to eldest brother and me to investigate. As the heir to Marquis Gu's manor, it will be easier for eldest brother to look for the records, while Sun has met young Miss Yin a few times and can be considered a little close. I might be able to glean some information from her." Gu Shubai glanced at him with a smile that carried a faintly teasing look. Speaking of cherry blossoms, here was another. He had not yet figured things out with Yao Yu, yet here came a young Miss Yin. Who knew if this would end up being a beautiful cherry blossom or a rotten one? Gu Jiugu noticed this look and coughed a few times in embarrassment. Gu Shubai saw this and retracted the look. Gu Huaijiang pondered this for a while. "I am not worried about Shubai. He knows how to investigate the things that he wants while keeping it a secret from In Shuwa. But Jiuge, you need to maintain a sense of propriety when interacting with young Miss Yin. Even if her brother and father did things that try to disadvantage my Marquis Gu's manor, she might not know of it. You absolutely must not harm the innocent." Gu Jiugu felt a little awkward from hearing these words. Father should not be suspecting that he would try to seduce her, right? He hastily cupped his hands. "Father, don't worry. Sun has a sense of propriety and definitely will not do anything to harm young Miss Yin." Gu Huaijiang looked at him suspiciously. He had a sense of propriety? He probably felt that he had a sense of propriety, but just how many girls in the capital admired him. All of them contended for his affection, and it was not uncommon to see actual fights break out because of this. If Yin Jiao also became like this, it would become even more problematic. In the end, he, Gu Huaijiang, had a reputation for being upright and proper. How could he have such an eye-catching son? It was truly strange. Humph, humph. This time, it was Gu Huaijiang who coughed. Gu Shubai slightly furrowed his brow. Has father's cough still not gotten better? Imperial physician's son said that it's just a cold, and it should get better with a bit of medicine. Just how long has it been? Yet it seems the cough is getting worse. Gu Huaijiang waved his hand. It can't be helped. When people get old, it's inevitable that they will be slower to recover from illness. I am doing quite well. His Majesty caught a cold this winter and still has not fully recovered. It's probably the case that I caught it from my many visits to the palace. Gu Jiugu did not notice it before, but now that Gu Shubai mentioned it, he noticed that Gu Huaijiang had been sick for a little too long. He said, "Father, you are also not doing well, so how about you stay home for the next few days? Just say that you are worried about making His Majesty sick. His Majesty will definitely understand." Gu Shubai said, "Father should just stay home and rest. Tomorrow, I will invite Imperial Physician's son to come and take a look. Leave the matters in court and at home to son and second brother. Father, there's no need to worry." Gu Huaijiang looked at his sons. They had already grown up and were able to help shoulder his burdens. Naturally, there was nothing for him to worry about. "All right, I will leave it to the two of you. Father will just start thinking about retiring early." Previously, Yu Fu said that she had seen great results in her training with her flying needles, being able to throw 8 needles at once. "Since there's no need for me to go into court tomorrow, I will go and keep her company while she trains." Gu Huaijiang rarely had any time to spare. Now that he had some time, he immediately thought of Yu Fu. It was fortunate that he did not have an actual daughter. Who knows just how jealous he might end up becoming. Gu Shubai and his brother bid farewell and left the study. The sky was dark, and the wind blew through the trees. Gu Jiugu furrowed his brow and looked up at the sky. It's already spring, yet the wind is getting cold. Gu Shubai followed his gaze and looked over. The treetops were swaying with the wind. In the darkness of night, they swayed like ghosts or spirits. He suddenly had a bad premonition. Want it or not, the world changes, and I can't shake this feeling that a large storm is headed straight for Marquis Gu's manor. In Qinghua Palace, the gates were tightly shut. The eunuch who had come to deliver something from the Imperial Household Department was too scared to make a sound upon seeing that all of the palace maids were waiting outside the hall. The chief palace maid, Mu Jin, walked over from the middle of the hall and gave him a look. The two then backed up a distance to speak. "The eldest prince came, so I fear that Her Highness will not have a chance to meet with you. Eunuch, you should go back for now." The eunuch who came for the delivery was Eunuch Huang, the head of the Imperial Household Department. In response, he said, "We only came today to deliver the monthly allowance. This is the silver that Qinghua Palace will receive for the month. Miss Mu Jin, please take a look, and we will be on our way." Mu Jin received the bundle of silver and bowed to him. Eunuch Huang then left Qinghua Palace on his own. After he left, Mu Jin felt the weight of the bundle and suddenly noticed that something seemed off. This time, it's not just His Majesty getting suddenly excited. This one's informant from the Western Palace came and reported that the second prince was happily telling Princess Danyang about it. "I fear that the imperial decree ordering preparations for the Eastern Palace will come." Dressed in plain but elegant clothes, Imperial Consort Xian leaned sideways on her sofa and put her forehead in her hands. She looked extremely tired. Recently, Emperor Ning's illness has continued to linger, and she had remained at his side to take care of him. She no longer had the energy that the younger concubines did, but for the sake of preventing anyone from taking away his favor, she continued to take care of everything on her own. It was fortunate that she was the one managing the inner palace, so there were no concubines who would dare to try and compete with her. She took care of Emperor Ning on her own, and only now found some time to come back and see the eldest prince. The eldest prince said, "Imperial consort mother, you're still worried about taking care of Father Emperor? Are you not at all worried?" During the past few days, he had been trying to discuss this matter with Imperial Consort Xian, yet Imperial Consort Xian had gone to take care of Emperor Ning, which left him waiting for a number of days. Imperial Consort Xian lifted her head. Naturally, this one was worried. But what good does that do? After all of these years, this one has worked hard in managing the inner palace and taking care of His Majesty. However, His Majesty never thought about it. Since this is the case, would I not need to work even harder in taking care of him in hopes of finally being able to make him feel something and show some concern for the two of us? The eldest prince looked at Imperial Consort Xian with a frown. She had grown accustomed to the virtuous act that she had been putting on after all of these years, and she continued with it even after a critical moment like this. Imperial Consort Mother, have you never considered that if Father Emperor never recovers from this illness, he won't be able to appoint Ning Qingyi as the crown prince? You are currently working tirelessly to take care of Father Emperor, and that is only helping them. Imperial Consort Xian shuddered and looked at the eldest prince in a daze. But His Majesty's illness is just a cold. Sooner or later, it will get better. When he does get better, he will appoint whomever he was planning to appoint. Even if I didn't take care of him, what good would that do? The eldest prince looked at her profoundly. The understanding between mother and son eventually allowed Imperial Consort Xian to understand what he was thinking. Her hand trembled as she nearly knocked over a cup of tea on the table. Imperial Consort Xian pointed at him. Imperial son, what do you mean by this? She clearly understood what the eldest prince meant, but the idea was too horrific. She had to hear it directly from the eldest prince to confirm her suspicions. The eldest prince moved closer and lowered his voice. If Father Emperor appoints a crown prince while he is alive, the position of emperor will definitely go to the crown prince after he passes away. If son wishes to contend for the throne, it would be by stealing it. But if Father Emperor never recovers from his illness, the court would not have a crown prince, while Ning Qingyi and I both have half of the court's approval, which gives me some room to contend. You really intend to act against your Father Emperor? Although Imperial Consort Xian might be dissatisfied with how Emperor Ning handled things, as a member of the inner palace, she could only think of ways to try and move Emperor Ning through his emotions. As a result, she spent the past few days taking care of feeding him his medicine, not daring to be the slightest bit negligent. But this usually calm and filial eldest prince, whom she viewed as her pride and joy, actually told her to let Emperor Ning fall ill and never recover. Then what would you do? The eldest prince said, hasn't Imperial Consort Mother been at Father Emperor's side and taken care of feeding him his medicine? As long as you add a little something to his medicine, Father Emperor's illness will gradually get worse, and nobody would suspect Imperial Consort Mother. Who said that nobody would? Imperial Consort Xian never thought that he would actually suggest that she should do it. His Majesty has so many people at his side. Even if there aren't any concubines from the inner palace, there are still eunuchs and palace maids. How do you want Imperial Consort Mother to avoid being seen? If I am seen, plotting to harm His Majesty is a crime that will see 9 generations of my family executed. The eldest prince said, Imperial Consort Mother, what else do you think we can do aside from take this step? Once Ning Qingyi is appointed to the position of crown prince, it will be hard for both of us to avoid death. Rather than waiting to die, son would rather take the initiative. There might even be a chance of victory. Imperial Consort Xian sat on the sofa, and the eldest prince's words struck her like lightning and echoed in her head like thunder. The head palace maid, Mu Jin, suddenly walked into the hall. What is it? Imperial Consort Xian had not yet recovered from her shock when she saw Mu Jin walk in with a look of displeasure. She saluted Imperial Consort Xian and the eldest prince. Your Highness, please take a look. This is the monthly allowance that eunuch Huang just delivered. and it's significantly less than the usual amount. This servant waited and noticed that it felt off. I sent someone to go and ask, and he actually said that it had always been this much. Imperial Consort Xian furrowed her brow and looked at the bundle in her hand. Indeed, it was not as plentiful as usual. She scolded. The people at the Imperial Household Department really have become muddled, even forgetting how much monthly allowance is to be given to this one's palace. What a bunch of fools. Mu Jin bit her lip and glanced at the eldest prince. It seemed that she had something that was hard to say. Imperial Consort Xian said, "If you have something to say, just say it." Mu Jin kneeled on the ground and said, "The person who was sent to ask heard eunuch Huang say to his subordinate eunuch that the second prince is the future crown prince, and there is no need to get too close with Qinghua Palace." Crash. The teacup next to Imperial Consort Xian's hand shattered on the ground. Imperial Physician's son, please come in. Outside the western wing, Qi Zhou led Imperial Physician's son inside. Lord Marquis has been here with the young miss since this morning. Since you frequently visit the manor, why not just perform the examination here in the young miss courtyard? Well put, well put. Imperial Physician's son walked in while chuckling. He could be considered a common guest in the western wing, and he was familiar with the path. In the past, whenever Yu Fu caught a cold or had a nosebleed, Marquis Gu's manor would bring him in to treat her. Later on, Yu Fu's body grew much stronger, so his visits were much less frequent, and he found this to be a pity. If he could meet with Yu Fu more often, he would be able to hear more and more about the situation in Immortals Valley, especially things like the deity of medicine's prescriptions. That would be of great benefit to him. Qizhou also knew that Imperial Physician's son liked Yu Fu. He had even brazenly asked Gu Huaijiang something immensely stupid, to allow Yu Fu to be raised in his manor. With nothing else to say, he just led him forward. Lien Bai came out from the room to receive him, bowing in a salute. Imperial Physician's son, Steward Qi, Lord Marquis, and young miss are in the back corridor. Saying this, she led the two of them inside. Imperial Physician's son walked at the front. Upon setting foot in the back corridor, a silver light flashed past. He immediately stopped moving and stood in place, not daring to move. Gu Huaijiang burst out laughing. Yu Fu covered her mouth. Sister Lien Bai, you didn't even give Imperial Physician's son a warning. What if he had gotten hurt? Lien Bai was also quite helpless. Imperial Physician's son was too anxious, and this servant did not get a chance to warn him before he stepped out. Imperial Physician's son settled his nerves and took a look. At the far end of the corridor, there was a target that had been riddled with silver needles. He happily walked up to take a look, wanting to reach out and touch but not daring to do so. These are young Miss Yu Fu's poison needles, right? This lowly official previously heard about them, but this is my first time seeing them. I heard that when young Miss Yu Fu went to save the eldest young sir, you threw them like this and defeated a large group of assassins. Isn't that right? Gu Huaijiang said. How does Imperial Physician's son know about this? Imperial Physician's son chuckled. When this lowly official heard that young Miss Yu Fu saved the eldest young sir, I was extremely worried, having assumed that young Miss Yu Fu would need this lowly official once she returned. That's why I asked around a great deal. I never thought. He rubbed his nose with a bit of a guilty conscience. He could not just say in front of Gu Huaijiang that he was actually extremely disappointed that Yu Fu was not hurt, right? He did not say it, but Gu Huaijiang was able to figure out the words that remained unspoken. Yu Fu said, Head General, since Imperial Physician's son has come, let's take care of the examination first. Though your illness is not serious, it would not be good to drag things out. Everyone then returned from the back corridor to the front, and Imperial Physician's son checked Gu Huaijiang's pulse. His brow suddenly furrowed. Strange. How truly strange. What strange? Imperial Physician's son lowered his wrist. Has Lord Marquis truly been taking the medicine that this lowly official prescribed? Why is it that the illness has not gotten better, but has actually gotten worse? Qi Zhou had been standing outside the door, but immediately entered to respond upon hearing this. This servant personally watched the preparations of Lord Marquis medicine. There isn't the slightest deviation from what imperial physician prescribed. Lord Marquis also downs the medicine in one gulp every time. Imperial physician's son, please be at ease. Imperial physician's son shook his head. Lord Marquis is someone with a military background and has a sturdy physique. A minor cold and a cough should not be a problem. This lowly official originally figured that Lord Marquis would have fully recovered after taking the medicine for 3 days, but it has already been 7 or 8 days. This should not be the case. With him saying it like this, Yu Fu also felt that something was off. Imperial physician's son moved to the side. Young Miss Yu Fu, how about you come and take a look? Yu Fu looked at Gu Huaijiang and modestly said, the greatest taboo in medicine is seeking too many opinions. Since Imperial physician's son has always been the one checking head general's pulse, how could I get in the way? Before Gu Huaijiang could say anything, Imperial physician's son had already responded, it's fine, it's fine. I do not mind. Young Miss Yu Fu has studied in Immortal's Valley, and I am all too eager to learn a bit from you. Now that he was being so open about it, she now felt a little embarrassed. Imperial physician's son was given a fright by her expression, and Gu Huaijiang also became stern. He knew that any time Yu Fu had this expression, it would not be a minor issue. Yu Fu said, Imperial physician's son, the prescription that you gave to head general, what was it? Imperial physician's son explained the medicines that he prescribed, and Yu Fu listened. These are the symptoms of some pathogen entering the body and causing problems at the throat. That's right. Could it be that you have a different opinion? Yu Fu took a deep breath. It's poison. Head general was poisoned. Imperial physician's son was extremely shocked. Even Qizhou, Lianbai, Lianzhu, and the others standing off to the side were shocked. Lord Marquis was poisoned? Who would dare to try and poison him? Yu Fu said, when it comes to treating illness and saving people, I do not have as much experience as Imperial physician's son, but when it comes to poisons, I am a little more familiar. This poison is very covert and concealed itself beneath the blood vessels. First, it assaults the throat, but I fear that it will slowly spread to the internal organs. Imperial physician's son, you should know that a pathogen getting into the body won't result in the throat turning purple. She motioned for Gu Huaijiang to lift at his chin, and Imperial physician's son came over to take a careful look. Below his Adam's apple, there was a patch of purple. It was so faint that it was almost invisible. Yu Fu was a little shorter than an adult and was the perfect height to see that spot. Imperial physician's son seemed to come to a sudden realization, and a cold sweat soaked his brow. It's fortunate that it was discovered by young Miss Yu Fu. Otherwise, even if this poison managed to spread to the internal organs, this lowly official might not have noticed. If anything happened to Lord Marquis, wouldn't this lowly official have been condemned for the rest of Easternling's history? Gu Huaijiang looked at Yu Fu. What poison is it exactly? Yu Fu fell silent for a while and said with difficulty, that, truthfully, I do not know. Your Majesty, Marquis Gu's manor sent someone to deliver some news. Lord Marquis fell ill and will be staying home to recover and is requesting a day off from Your Majesty. Emperor Ning was partially laying on the bed. The bright yellow canopy of his bed hung to the side and contrasted with his pale white face. Imperial Consort Xian sat next to the bed and held a small white bowl in her hands. She was feeding Emperor Ning his medicine. Hearing Eunuch Gao report this, her hand stopped moving. Emperor Ning sat up straight. What illness is it? Is it serious? Eunuch Gao said. Imperial physician's son said that some pathogen entered his body, which caused a cough. It isn't anything serious. It's just that Lord Marquis is no longer young and needs to stay home to recover. Emperor Ning let out a sigh. It really is a coincidence for the two of us. Even getting sick, we get sick at the same time. A few days ago, Huaijiang came into the palace to see how we were doing, and he even advised us to go out and get some exercise when we have spare time. He usually spends a good amount of time each day training, yet hasn't he also fallen ill? After saying this, He gave eunuch Gao an order. Go and have some of the 1,000-year ginseng that just arrived at the palace delivered to Marquis Gu's manor. Advise Marquis Gu on our behalf to recover fully before returning to court. There's no need to rush. Recently, Shubai has been able to take responsibility for some tasks and will not be negligent.
Yes.
Eunuch Gao complied and slowly retreated from the bedchamber. Imperial Consort Xian used the small spoon to ladle some medicine from the bowl. Your Majesty, take your medicine first. The efficacy will be reduced if it gets cold. Emperor Ning suddenly remembered something and simply took the bowl and downed it in one gulp. Putting down the bowl, he had a bitter expression, and Imperial Consort Xian hastily brought him a piece of preserved fruit. Emperor Ning placed it in his mouth and felt a little better. We heard people say that medicine isn't as bitter if it's downed in one gulp, but why is it that we still find it extremely bitter? He lazily shifted his posture and crossed his arms in front of his chest. Beloved consort, say, aren't we getting old? Imperial Consort Xian smiled and said, Your Majesty isn't getting old. Rather, Your Majesty is getting younger and younger, even finding the medicine bitter like a little kid. It was clear that Emperor Ning had not been comforted by these words. We are old. Even Huaijiang is getting old. If it's not him getting old, when had he ever requested a day off because of a minor cold? As people get old, even the smallest problems can have major effects. Just like this time with us, never recovering from this minor cold. Imperial Consort Xian subconsciously averted her gaze, then placed the bowl of medicine that he had just drank on a platter that Mu Jin was holding. Mu Jin glanced at Imperial Consort Xian, then bowed and retreated from the bedchamber. The matter of Gu Huaijiang being poisoned was not made public, and Imperial Physician Sun just acted as if things were as he originally believed. In secret, this matter was handed to Yu Fu to handle. Yu Fu, can you treat this poison? Gu Shubai and Gu Jiugu were supposed to be investigating the truth behind Yin Jiyao's birth mother, but who knew that Gu Huaijiang would suddenly be poisoned? How could they still have the mind to investigate? Gu Huaijiang lay face down in bed with his top off. A number of silver needles were stuck in his back. Yu Fu shook her head. All I can do is hold it off for now. I will only be able to begin planning once I have figured out what poison this is. In this world, there are so exceedingly few poisons that I do not know. This was most likely the work of Kuan Wushang. Kuan Wushang? Gu Jiugu said, These past few days, I have had Steward Qi investigate all of the servants working in the manor, especially those working in the kitchen. All of the food that father has consumed has been investigated, but the source of the poison has not been found. Kuan Wushang left Eastern Ling a long time ago. How could he possibly manage to do this? Yu Fu looked at Gu Shubai. Eldest brother, do you remember the last words that he said in his letter? I think that the thing that he mentioned was poisoning the head general. Gu Shubai said, Based on poison, there's likely nobody in Eastern Ling who could compare with you. There would only be Kuan Wushang and the other disciples from Immortals Valley who would be familiar with your circumstances and which poisons you don't know about. For example, the poison that had been provided to Yin Shuhua. Although Yu Fu did not know it, she was able to treat it. But the poison used this time. Yu Fu checked the time, then started pulling out the silver needles from Gu Huaijiang's back. The ones near his neck were dark at the tip. The further down the body she went, the lighter the needles were. The ones nearest his hip were completely normal. Qi Zhou stepped forward and helped Gu Huaijiang put his shirt on. Lord Marquis, how do you feel? Gu Huaijiang concentrated and thought for a bit. My throat feels much better, as it's no longer as dry as before. I no longer feel an uncontrollable urge to cough. The acupuncture that Yu Fu has performed for me these past few days seems to have been effective. Yu Fu said, Head General, lift your head. Gu Huaijiang lifted his head, and everyone looked at his throat. The patch of light purple was still there. Yu Fu had a grave expression. It's just treating the symptoms, not the source cause. If the medicine to treat the poison is not found, the poison will slowly spread and will eventually reach a point where it can no longer be controlled. Second brother, you must think of a way to find the source of the poison. It's not just limited to the food that Head General eats. It could also be something that he touched or smelled. Chizhou heard this and hastily said, "The servants working in the manor have all been working here for a long time. The younger servants are also the children of the older servants, so there shouldn't be any problems with them." Gu Shubai said, "Steward Qi, Yu Fu isn't suspecting the manor's servants. It's just that something as serious as father being poisoned is something that must be investigated carefully. This is especially true of those nearest to father, as they have the most opportunities to poison father. I ask Steward Qi to investigate carefully." Qi Zhou obediently complied, but Yu Fu suddenly looked at him. She suddenly remembered someone. "You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.